Good morning. I'm here to give you an update on the FBI's investigation of Secretary Clinton. What I want to do is tell you what we're recommending. But first, let me tell you what we found. 110 emails, 52 email chains have been determined to contain classified information.
What difference at this point does it make?
8 of those chains are top secret, 36 of those chains secret, and 8 contain confidential information.
What difference at this point does it make?
Everything I did was admitted. There was no law, no regulation.
Secretary Clinton should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email.
None of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, not even Gmail.
But first of all, nothing was marked classified.
To the contrary,
Nothing was marked classified.
there is evidence of
Nothing was
tremendous amount,
nothing was
tremendous
marked
amount.
classified.
Now let me tell you what we
Oh my
found.
God.
110 emails.
It was not the best choice.
52 email chains
It was a mistake.
have been determined to contain classified information.
What difference at this point does it
8
make?
of those chains are top
Was the
secret,
best choice.
36 of those chains
I said
secret,
it was a mistake.
and 8 contain confidential information.
What difference at this point does it
With
make?
respect to our recommendation, this is going to be an unusual statement in at least a couple of ways. Although there is evidence, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. I know there will be intense public debate. I know there will be intense public debate. I know there will be intense public debate. What difference at this point does it make? 110 emails.
It wasn't the best choice.
52 email chains
I made a mistake.
have been determined to contain classified information.
What difference at this point does it
8
make?
of those chains are
It
top
was not a
secret,
good choice.
36 of those chains
I said it was a mistake.
and 8 contain confidential information.
What difference at this point does it make?
All right. What difference at this point does it make? What is up, y'all? What's up? Yes, I had to start with a banger just to kind of, well, first of all, just give me a second to get myself together because I'm late, of course. But it is a banger. It's a banger, and sadly, it's a true story too. It's like you have to laugh to keep from crying. How's everybody doing? How is the weekend going? That's good. I hope it's going well. So today I wanted to share with you guys a documentary that I think every American should watch, but sadly won't watch. They won't get a chance to watch it. Most Americans probably don't even know that it came out. And it's called A Plot Against the President. Okay. So this is how we're going to do it. First, let me just say how we're going to do it. Number one, you don't have to really sit here and watch the documentary. Like, you can put this on, and then when you hear me talking and when you listen to listening to it alone while you're mopping or doing the dishes or getting dinner ready, it's damning. It's already damning. So you're not going to miss anything if you don't watch the people talking. Okay. And so there's that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm not gonna play the documentary and then keep stopping every time I hear something like, oh yeah, and then oh yeah, because that's annoying, right? So it's like an hour and 30 minutes long, but every half hour I'm gonna I'll do is I'll stop at every half hour and tell you add on or whatever, because this documentary was done I saw it 2 years ago, and so obviously a lot's happened in 2 years, okay? And what happened was, when I first got on Twitter and I was following a lot of conservatives, and I still follow them. I'm sorry, y'all. It is dumb hot here because I don't know. I don't know if it's the hair. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, so when I got on Twitter, I was following Jack Posobiec and everything. And he had put out this announcement that they were going to premiere this movie they made about Donald Trump called The Plot to Take, Against the President. So I looked into it or whatever, and it was in Maryland, and I live a little bit not too far from Maryland. So I was like, oh, you know what? Let me go. It was around June. It was actually, I think it was this time in June. So I said, let me go ahead and go. And my birthday week. So I was like, let me just, that'll be fun. And I went to go see it, and I was taken back. Like, I was like, yo, this is, I know I keep messing with it, right? Like, Cindy's funny, but it's just so hot and it keeps sticking to my neck. So I just was taken aback though. I was like, yo, oh my God, all this. Like, I heard at that time, you know, I was kind of new into the game, not really new, but yeah, like a new Republican. And I had heard, you know, like, oh, they spied on him. And I was like, oh yeah, they probably did all kinds of crazy things. Just to watch the intricate level and the lies that were told to the American public, and also involving Russia, to the point where, you know, where we are today with Russia is just, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of it stems from not just this, but they put us in a bad position. So without further ado, so I'm gonna put it on. Now the thing is, I'm not gonna keep this live on my catalog, because they definitely will copyright this. I know somebody will. But like I said, every American should see this. But like I said, without further ado, we are going to put it on now. And I hope you, wait, let me make it big. I hope you enjoy. Okay, my bad. I know I said I wasn't going to pause it. Real quick, I want to thank everybody. What I should do is I want to thank everybody who's watching. I want to thank everybody who came through. I want to thank everybody who hit the like button. I want to thank everybody who's been supporting me, everybody who's subscribed. I just want to thank everybody that's been part of this journey, people that I've done live streams with. Of course, Saturday Night Hypnosis, whole squad, you know, LaRon from Broken Traditions, Che, Jambalaya Talks, Adam Coleman, anybody who's been, Morgan, anybody, C. Trafilo, anybody who's been on this channel, who has talked to me or anything. I want to thank everybody, Cindy, Billy, everybody who's been here, been riding with me, Sarah, Salty Butterbags, you know, Fancy Pass Pikachu, just everybody, because I did hit that 1,000 and I couldn't have did that without y'all. So thank you. All right, now I'm not gonna pause it again. So again, 30 minutes from now.
President Carter pledged the utmost in cooperation in the transition that will take place.
I will always be grateful. Can hardly believe it, but it's sinking in now, the enormity of what has taken place. Peaceful election, eventually a peaceful transfer of power.
I accept tonight the responsibility that you have given me to be the leader of this, the greatest country in human history.
I have a lot to be thankful for tonight. I'm thankful for America and thankful that we are able to resolve our electoral differences in a peaceful way. This peaceful transfer of power is one of the hallmarks of a true democracy.
President Carter, President Bush Sr., as well as the current president have all been very gracious and offered to provide any help that they can in this transition process.
We are now all rooting for his success in uniting and leading the country. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth, and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team.
The only thing we had wrong is it was worse than we thought. Devin was the first, because he got to see information first. As then chair of the Intelligence Committee, he sensed there was wrongdoing early on.
He was a lone voice for a very long time. We would not be where we are without Devin Nunes.
They started it right after, the 1st of December 2016.
It's becoming clear we have suffered a desecration of our democracy not seen since Watergate.
It was right after the election, and I thought, are they really going to go down this road of this Russia issue?
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They helped. They were in on it.
Vladimir Putin was the person who authorized the interference in our election.
What Russia did was no different than what they do all the time. It was totally expected. Right after the election, a couple weeks, then I realized, like, wow, they're just really starting to foment this. And we really almost thought it was a joke, like those of us on the Republicans on the committee, like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election? We're really going to go into this?
My hope is that the president-elect is going to similarly be concerned with making sure that we don't have potential foreign influence in our election process.
And then Obama and Brennan made it real by creating what I call Obama's dossier, which was this intelligence community assessment, which was the fastest any government agency's ever done a report. And of course, they took just a few weeks and they said, oh yeah, the Russians were trying to help Trump. Obama really was going to stick it to the Russians, and he kicked some people out of the country.
35 Russian diplomats in the U.S. expelled, just 72 hours to leave. Closing 2 Russian government compounds, rec centers allegedly used for spying, shut down as of noon Friday.
We used the Ways and Means Committee to hold what is a pretty unusual public hearing for the Intelligence Committee. James Comey comes in, then he asks me to come back to the back room and tells me that he's going to publicly announce they're looking into the Trump campaign. And I was like, wow, does he have new information? Is there something new?
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
It blew up into a spectacle. It gave the appearance that this was a real investigation with real information, even though we had yet to see what that real information was.
I interviewed a number of extraordinary candidates for this job, all with sterling credentials. But what gave me confidence that this was the right man for the job was in talking to him, a sense that this is somebody who knows what's right and what's wrong.
The FBI's reputation for integrity is a gift given to every new employee by those who went before. No case, no source, no fear of embarrassment is worth jeopardizing the gift of integrity.
Comey has a great history of fabricating crimes and trapping innocent citizens in crimes that otherwise would not be committed by leading the victim to believe that a truthful answer to a question would be an admission to a crime, whereas in fact it would not be an admission to a crime. When the subject then lies, he's bagged his quarry. He did that with Martha Stewart. He later did the same thing to Scooter Libby through his special counsel that he appointed, Patrick Fitzgerald. Later on, they did the same thing with George Papadopoulos. He did the same thing with Michael Flynn.
Mike is one of 9 children, blue-collar background, decided to enter the military and rose to the rank as 3-star general, a lieutenant general in the Army, a man who put his life on the line for our country on numerous occasions. He was well-versed in the secrets of our country.
Before he became the director of defense intelligence, was made responsible for all intelligence collection in Afghanistan as the theater MI guy. What Mike Flynn did was truly stunning. He revolutionized the way we do intelligence in theater, in the battlefield. He understood that when you're fighting groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, it is the rapidity and the quality of immediately exploitable intelligence that matters the most. When you go in there on your raid with your alpha team, or the stuff you pick up right there has got to be exploited now. You don't put it in a bag, you don't put it on a secure service, send it back to Langley or to Fort Meade and then sit on it for 9 months and then see if it's useful.
When Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, he flew to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with Barack Obama And in that meeting, Barack Obama told him unequivocally, don't let anybody tell you who to hire in your administration. You must surround yourself with your own people, except General Mike Flynn. The president flew back to New York that night, and I remember speaking to him very directly. And he said, what job are we giving Mike Flynn? I said, any job you want, sir. And then the offer was extended for Mike to become the national security advisor.
The Obama administration was after him for defying them on Iran and on other questions. You know, they fired him from the DIA. And famously, in their Oval Office meeting after the election, Obama said to incoming President-elect Trump, you know, there's basically two people in the world that you can't trust. One is Putin and the other is Mike Flynn. I mean, give me a break.
We talked about reforming the intelligence community because these 17 sprawling agencies, they've gotten a lot of stuff wrong. The weapons of mass destruction being the most obvious example.
Every intelligence agency, every bureaucracy is worried about being reformed. So Flynn had been loud and clear that he did not like the intelligence that he was getting when he was in the field. He did not get what he called actionable intelligence. So he was going to cut some nice cushy jobs at Langley.
He was talking about going after people's budgets, seeing who was wasteful, who was doing the job. We're going to cut these institutions down to size and see how it works. So they were terrified.
And then there are probably reasons why the intel bureaucracies are specifically resistant to change, because they really are unaccountable. If you're unaccountable for a long time, you get used to being unaccountable, and accountability sounds bad. Like, you don't want to have to, if you haven't never answered to anybody, you don't want to have to answer to somebody, especially when some of the things you've been doing when exposed might make you look bad.
As you know, when this attack happened, the White House initially said it arose out of a spontaneous protest over an anti-Muslim video. That turned out not to be true, and the White House said they relied entirely on CIA talking points.
The non-response to Benghazi was a deliberate decision. It wasn't an oversight, and it was because there was an illegal covert weapons program being run there. The community writ large, the special forces community, the counterterrorism community, the intelligence community was aware of what was going on. Several members, even in the leadership of the Republican Party, were aware of what was going on. What you had was this bipartisan corruption, and this bipartisan corruption was something that I think Flynn was well aware of. Where the intelligence community was no longer necessarily servicing the country, it was servicing the Obama regime itself.
We haven't put any demands on them. We have used this soft power approach.
Mike Flynn is viewed as the consummate disruptor, and now he was going to be in a position to bring that disruption to the entire national security community. So he's moved up a level, and his ability to impact is now going to be much more widespread. And of course, this absolutely terrifies the Central Intelligence Agency. It terrifies the FBI. Because somebody who knows where all of the secrets are is now going to be in a position to really harness that knowledge to disrupt things.
He's the former director of the DIA. He knew where the bodies were buried. He knew the corruption. He knew the lies. He knew the perversion of the threat environment.
He knew what was going on, and he objected. He knew about the machinations by the Obama administration and the West generally to support terrorists in Syria in their crazed effort to take out Assad. Of course, a lot of that was being organized out of Libya.
When he spoke up against the Obama administration and said, look, just because you killed Osama bin Laden doesn't mean that you've stopped radical Islamic movements. And General Flynn predicted the rise of Islamic extremism.
I'm done trying to convince our president to actually define this enemy. We know what it is. It's radical Islamic terrorism. They are vicious. They're barbaric. They are on the march.
They didn't like Mike Flynn. Remember, Barack Obama fired Mike Flynn because he was a rabble-rouser.
The reason that Flynn had been fired is because he was speaking the truth about ISIS. The straw that broke the camel's back was what's now been very well known as this testimony that Flynn did. It was the global threat testimony where all of the heads of the intelligence agencies, John Brennan, Jim Comey, all of the people that later on would be part of the effort to take Michael Flynn down and ultimately take Trump down. Flynn had been raising the alarm about how the Obama administration was not taking the necessary steps to protect the American people from the growing Islamic threat. And Flynn was told before he went into that testimony, do not say anything about the fact that ISIS is resurgent. He decided, I'm not going to lie. I need to be very, very honest with the American people.
They are increasingly adapting
to an environment that is actually benefiting them. And that, to me, is a increasingly growing threat.
After that, Jim Clapper calls Mike Vickers up, and Clapper tells Vickers, you need to fire Flynn. Clapper had received this instruction directly from Susan Rice at the request of Barack Obama. In any event, they tell him, you're going to have to retire early. We need you to leave the Defense Intelligence Agency. Of all the people who came into the White House, Mike Flynn was the most dangerous to the swamp. He had to be taken out. They knew he knew what the intelligence community was up to, and he knew what Obama had done to undermine our national security for 8 years. He knew why Obama did what he did with Iran. $140 billion, released a regime that every Friday says, destroy America, that you're actually facilitating the rise of the theocratic Iranian regime that's taking our naval personnel hostage.
President Obama negotiated the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. It was fatally flawed on so many different levels. So when you have somebody like a General Flynn serving at the highest levels in the room, making recommendations, weighing in on work product, and telling the other 97% of a story on a weak, flawed approach to a particular conflict, that ends up leading to increased resentment. And I think there are people inside the West Wing, right up to President Obama, who became anti-Michael Flynn for all of the wrong reasons. It's a Chicago-style politics approach that was brought here from Illinois into the White House for 2 terms. And they were trying to kick a few people, burn a few things down before they left office.
The Obama administration earlier today allowed the United Nations to pass a resolution condemning Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank as, quote, a flagrant violation of international law.
It was a shift in U.S. foreign policy that was contradictory to the will of Congress. It was contradictory to the will of the American people. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It was really disgusting to watch it play out the way it was. It was an effort to kind of burn down a relationship before checking out.
He expelled 35 diplomats from the United States. It was a silly act, unnecessarily provocative, and it was grandstanding. It was to no purpose.
For those who aren't familiar with it, federal government provides resources for the last 2 candidates to establish transition teams to help their prospective presidential nominee take over government should they win.
There's nothing wrong or unusual about an incoming transition team talking to folks in other countries about foreign policy. Obama did it as he should do it. Flynn did what he should do, and he diffused what really was a hot mess.
Flynn's calls were intercepted by the U.S. intelligence community. Secret transcripts show Flynn did discuss the sanctions, a potential violation of federal law prohibiting private citizens from engaging in diplomacy.
From the very beginning, this conversation that General Flynn had with the Russian ambassador was about a UN resolution that was coming up. And if you read the transcript, General Flynn had a perfect phone call. He was advocating for the United States. It's exactly what you'd want someone to say. Let's de-escalate this. Let's not try to make it worse than what it is.
So you would want the incoming national security director to be talking to his counterparts in important. Now he didn't have to talk to, whoever the NSA equivalent is in certain countries, but the Russians, the Chinese, the Germans, our allies and important players in geopolitical sense, he needs to be talking to them. He's doing his job. And of course, the intelligence agencies are listening to Kislyak conversation. That's kind of what they do.
I believe that if anyone inside of the United States government would be fully aware of U.S. intelligence collection capabilities, tactics, procedures, it would be somebody like a Michael Flynn.
Flynn had been in the intelligence world. Therefore, he knew that every single phone call on an open civilian phone is intercepted. Therefore, nobody could suspect that he was somehow plotting because he wouldn't use the phone, would you? But he didn't realize how determined they were. They pretended not to know what everybody in the field knows, that when you telephone the Russian ambassador, you're not meeting him in a park at night. you telephone him, you are basically telling the U.S. system, the intelligence people, what you want them to hear, what you say.
Rather than say, okay, there's a new president and let's just hand the files over and do a peaceful transition, they really wanted to mess with the incoming president at a time when he was the most vulnerable, which was right after the election and his team was preparing. And so this culminated with attacks on General Flynn. When General Flynn was doing exactly what Susan Rice and Samantha Power admitted in House testimony that they were doing in their transition. If you read the transcript, Susan Rice admits this is what she did. Of course she had a transition period. Of course they talked to other countries. If you weren't talking to other countries, you weren't doing your job. You were preparing to take over the national security apparatus of the greatest country in the world.
Tensions get unnecessarily high with a nuclear armed superpower. You don't necessarily know where things are going to go. So it's probably for the best to try to keep things on a low boil.
In 2015, Putin had said some complimentary things about then candidate Donald Trump.
After Vladimir Putin praised Donald Trump as, quote, undoubtedly a bright and talented person.
When people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia.
Candidate Donald Trump responded with saying nice things about him. He has a total, absolute understanding of who Putin is. He knows he's a killer. He knows he's an amoral man. He's somebody we have to deal with. Putin may be somebody you wouldn't want to deal with personally, but when I represent 320 million people, he has a nuclear weapon, I better get to know him. But they saw that, and they could exploit those comments that Trump had made, which really meant nothing. They were less damaging than the comment that President Obama had made just a few years earlier when he told Medvedev, who was sort of Putin's flunky, he said, tell Vladimir when the election is over, I can go easier on him. Wow. Had Trump ever said that, they'd impeach him right away. The New York Times would have done an editorial the next day and said, impeach president, wants to sell our country.
They had the picture of Donald Trump. And in that picture, they refused to admit that part of Donald Trump could be geopolitical. Therefore, they have to have sinister explanations, like he's Putin's agent. He was bribed, he was corrupted, he was blackmailed, or whatever. And that is how the FBI people were going to get him.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine two FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over.
James Comey and his band of thugs at the FBI, under his leadership, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Comey bragged of this.
Oh, I pulled that off. I basically played a trick and got away with it. If it had been a more experienced administration, I wouldn't have gotten away with it. And the audience was, isn't it? How funny to set up an innocent man.
James Comey knew the protocol from the FBI was to call over the White House counsel and request a meeting with the National Security Advisor or any other senior staff. Mike Flynn sat down with those two FBI agents. They're then supposed to write what are called 302s.
A 302 is an FBI report of an interview. They interviewed General Flynn just 2 days into his new term as National Security Advisor for the newly inaugurated president. And they did it in what was a complete ambush.
The day that Mike Flynn had the interview with Pete Strzok and Joe Pientka, several members of the national security staff, including the Intelligence Programs Office, were on Mike Flynn's calendar for a briefing. Ezra was part of that team that was going to be briefing Mike Flynn on that day.
Flynn had brought in a young guy named Ezra Cohen to work for him as he went about trying to reset the intelligence community's focus.
He arrived at Flynn's office, and as he explained it. He's standing there and he's waiting for the meeting to begin. The time is running over, and he turns to Flynn's assistant. He says, "Who is the general in there with?" And the assistant says, "The general, he's in there for a FBI intelligence briefing." This was very confusing to Ezra because, in fact, the intelligence briefing that was supposed to be with the FBI was set up for the following day. Ezra's waiting there, and he starts getting this incredible sinking feeling, knowing that Mike Flynn is meeting by himself with 2 FBI agents. Ezra immediately gets on the phone and calls John Eisenberg, the White House National Security Council legal advisor. John Eisenberg is furious. John races down to Mike Flynn's office, and as he arrives, Pete Strzok and Joe Pientka are leaving the interview. Following day after the fateful Flynn interview, there was the scheduled intelligence briefing. At the interview was General Flynn, KT McFarland, Keith Kellogg, Ezra Cohen-Watnick, John Eisenberg, and from the FBI were Bill Priestap and Andy McCabe. McCabe, at the end of the meeting, goes to Flynn's desk and he says, "General, do you mind if I have a word with you?" Flynn says, "Sure, absolutely. What's up, Andy?" McCabe pulls out the draft interview notes from the Flynn interview out of his lock bag. And he says to Flynn, waving it around, "I just want to let you know, we've decided there's nothing here and we're considering this matter closed." Now, of course, we know that this was a complete lie, one of McCabe's many lies. After McCabe left, Flynn called back in the group of NSC staffers that had been there, pointed to the seat that McCabe was in, and said, "That is a very bad man, and he's out to get me."
2 or 3 days before he resigned, we got a phone call from the Washington Post. And a reporter had said that he had just interviewed Mike Flynn. And Mike Flynn made statements about his phone call to the Russian ambassador, said that he hadn't discussed sanctions. But the Washington Post reporter says, "But we have a transcript," or they were read a transcript that says the opposite. So we go into General Flynn's office. He said, "I've gone over and over. I can't remember which phone call I had what conversation in." But what really struck me was, wait a minute. They're talking about a phone call that would have been classified at the highest level. It was so highly classified, I didn't even know the transcript existed, much less was cleared to read it. And yet somehow the Washington Post had a copy of it.
When the David Ignatius article came out of the Washington Post, Mike Flynn was summoned by Mike Pence. He gave us this indication that something wasn't right. And what he was referring to was the fact that Pence had bought into this assault from David Ignatius.
That story then broke. Let me put it this way. It had an external effect and an internal effect. And the internal effect was a lot of people were upset about it. It was basically the chief of staff and other very, very senior advisors were having these conversations. And they continued through the weekend.
So Flynn is really coming under an enormous amount of pressure from the vice president to explain his call from Kislyak. It seemed very unusual that the vice president would be taking this level of interest in this. We now know that it was because he had come under the influence of his chief of staff, who of course was compromised by Comey's inner circle.
They're constantly making Lieutenant General Flynn radioactive, to the point where I'm sure the vice president and president are saying to themselves, how do we get this calmed down? Maybe if we get rid of Flynn, it will calm down.
Like I could tell people were out to get him fired, but I ran around and I started trying to talk to anybody who would listen. I was like, "You can't do this. This is dumb. This doesn't deserve this." And also I was trying to appeal to people's self-interest and saying, if you give the president's enemies a scalp like this so early over something so trivial, you're not feeding the beast. The beast doesn't get fat and happy and go to sleep. It brays for more blood. This will not turn this off. This will make everything worse. I can remember at about 6:30 that night, all of us, myself, KT, General Flynn, and the 2 executive assistants, all in his office, we were urging him to try to see if he could just go and see him, go to the residence and see the president. And he wouldn't try. He's like, "I'm not going to go, and he has to make his own decision, and I'm going to leave it to him, and I will abide by whatever his decision is." My sense was always that the president was reluctant to do it, really liked and still likes General Flynn, got along well in the campaign. They clicked in a way that he didn't click with any of his other small team of foreign policy advisors, and really felt the loss. And you could almost tell he immediately regretted it and on Monday, like 8 o'clock at night, I think, was when General Flynn resigned.
We begin with a major shakeup inside the Trump White House. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn forced to resign after what the administration is calling an erosion of trust. At issue, Flynn's call with the Russian ambassador on the same day President Obama was imposing new sanctions on Russia because of Russia.
I think once Flynn was gone, there was nobody to ride herd over what the operation that they had carried over into the administration was going to do. And so they got basically carte blanche. And from there, they began, they were spying on the president, his family, his associates, spying on the administration. When Flynn left, literally within 2 days of that, Ezra first discovered this enormous number of unmaskings that had been done, over 300 of them.
At the end of January in 2017, Ezra Cohen was asked to review a very, very benign policy.
All right. So I'm going to take the first break and let's recap like the first third of what we just saw there, like very, very important stuff. Now, first, let me just answer a couple of people. Thank you, Hypnotic, for the kind words about this channel. I'm going to blow up. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Jambalaya. Traditions, I did shout you out. You probably didn't hear me. I don't know if you're even still here. Thank you, everybody coming through and watching. All right. So when we heard Russia hoax, and we're not even there yet, right? But I remember hearing that Russia and Donald Trump's campaign were talking. This was back when I was a leftist and I believed everything that I heard on the news. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is so crazy. Oh my God, the Russians are involved in our elections. Like, I was like so worked up over something that I don't even know why. I had never really cared about these kind of things, but for some reason I did anyway. So let's rewind. So all of a sudden they started in on Russia. They were talking about, they have reasons to believe that Russia had gotten involved in our elections. And then Obama was able to come up with a paperwork of 17 intelligence officers in the intelligence community to say that, yes, Russia was involved in our elections. Just like the same 50-something intelligence officers or CIA retired leaders or whatever, who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was, in fact, Russian disinformation, right? And then, of course, after the election, it was okay to say that Hunter Biden's laptop was, in fact, not Russian disinformation. Amazing, okay? So then now, what's up, Harry Toe? So now all of a sudden they start expelling Russians. Now you have to understand that step that they took. What they did was they started expelling Russians, and then they started putting sanctions on Russia. Okay, now this is happening while the transitioning is going on into Trump's term. So of course, so what that's happening, but you got Trump's team coming in. Now, while Trump's team's coming in, what did Obama say? Remember, Obama said, don't ever let anybody tell you who to hire in your staff or who to put in your staff. You surround yourself with the people that you know and that you want to surround yourself with, except for General Mike Flynn. And Trump did exactly what I would have did. I'd have been like, all right, except, so yeah, I don't want Mike Flynn. No? Okay, good. Yeah, what's up? What I need to make Mike Flynn like right after the vice president. Like I need him there. That's exactly what you do. So, because it's like, well, what's the problem with this person? How come you don't like him? All right. So Mike Flynn, being a very diligent man, he's like what they would call a rabble rouser. Like he sees what's going wrong with our military industrial complex, that our intelligence agencies are not actually working for the American people. They're not actually trying to get evidence and facts and things together to save us, or to give us the heads up of what's going on. They're in fact working for themselves and the whole deep state. I mean, there's just no other word for it, because they call it the Obama regime. But what you have to understand is that this stuff has been going on since even before Obama, and that is not an excuse to Obama. Let's just be very clear. So now, but he knows. So he's one of them people who knows, and he doesn't like what he's seeing. Like Obama giving, the Iranians. No, ISIS was started by the American establishment. They were getting funded with weapons and things from the American establishment, kind of on a hush hush. Well, he knew that, and he was trying to tell people from the rip, like, yo, this is happening and nobody's paying attention. Like, I don't know what else to do. So he's a rabble rouser. That's what you would call him, like a rabble rouser. But he's the one who knows everything that's going on in the system. He knows all the cobwebs, right? He knows everything. So they need him out of there. So whatever, by any means necessary, he has to go. And so when it says that Michael, and then also when he signed on with the Trump team, he made it clear, like, these intelligence communities, there's just too many people in them. The FBI, the CIA. He said there's too many people in them. You can't keep control of what's going on. So we need to cut some of that. What does that sound like? Drain the swamp. Okay, so when people say, "Oh, I don't like that," Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp and he didn't. The person who was supposed to help him do that was removed from before he even started his term, for real, right? Because then, all right, so now they're saying he has to go, so they set him up. Now, what did he do? He was a transition team. He was talking to Russians and everything, and he had to talk to them because that's what you do. You're coming in and you want to de-escalate, because right now, so at the time, American establishment had pissed off Russian establishment, like, wait a minute, we're being punished for something we didn't even do. You don't have any evidence to the case. So he's on the phone with them like, listen, when we come through, we're gonna calm some of this down and we're gonna see what's going on. Whatever he must have said. That's in the that he had to say. This is nothing new. So, but they have a transcript. Now he gets called in by the FBI. They talk to him about a bunch of stuff, whatever. Then the Washington Post is interviewing him about his phone calls. And then he's like, no, I didn't talk to him about sanctions. Well, yeah, like, I'm not going to tell the Washington Post everything on the phone call, because back then, like, I don't have to necessarily tell you every little thing, because I'm also still trying to, like, keep this in control. I'm not trying to have anything escalate. Come on. The man's not even president yet, and we're almost about to start a war with Russia that we don't need to be involved with. And so then the Washington Post says, but we have transcripts. What is the Washington Post doing with transcripts from these phone calls, these highly classified phone calls? Why do they have transcripts, And so now it makes him look like a liar, I guess. And then Pence is buying into the story because, Pence would buy into the story. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even shocked about that. And so it becomes that they end up having to get rid of Flynn because it looks like there's it looks a certain ways perception of reality and how it looks to the American people. And so, and it left the stain. And of course, Michael Flynn is probably looking like, I'm not going to be a distraction in this man's, administration. And the worst thing that could ever happen was that Mike Flynn resigns. Not only did he resign, though, but it got worse, though, for Mike Flynn. This isn't a documentary of Mike Flynn, but I believe he had a gag order for a while where he could not talk about exactly what happened to him, because it's more than just, oh, he just resigned. Like, if I'm not mistaken, now this I'm loosely quoting, I believe they threatened his family too. Loosely quoting, allegedly. I can't, I've watched so many things on this. It's like sometimes you're not, it's like you're trying to remember where you got that from with the source and everything, but it's insane. So like they blacklisted Mike Flynn. They made sure nobody would talk to him. They made sure to get him out. When, of course, the only people who would talk to him was like Alex Jones and people like that, people who watch, right? The mainstream media is not going to put on Mike Flynn to really tell the American people what happened when the president didn't even start his term yet. Now, and I'm going to real quick rewind back to Rudy Giuliani, who's always putting 2 feet in his mouth. Like, first of all, this is not a Putin apologist type of documentary or whatever. I just hate the arrogance sometimes of these so-called politicians, leaders, whatever, to say like, oh, well, because we know Putin is an amoral man, he's a killer. He knows what kind of person he is, and Medvedev is just Putin's flunk. What is? Somebody please drop, if you will, like a comment in the chat. Let me know what's the difference between between Obama, Clinton, Bush, and the massive amount of killing that they do. Biden, we just bombed, Somalia. We're in Syria still causing havoc. I'm confused. What is it that Putin does this? Like, does he do the killings a different way? We have to start speaking things in reality. It can't be just, we don't like Russia, so we say whatever. Because if I'm leaving the left because I feel like I've been lied to. I cannot come to the right and get fed a different set of lies. I'm not saying you need to love Putin. It's just keep some of the extras out of it. Just tell me the straightforward. That's all I want. Because now fast forward today, we see where we're at. And this will all connect to where we're at today. All right. So now we're going to go into the second part, because like we said, we're going to do it in 3 parts, about now how they start spying on Donald Trump.
Policy on how to unmask U.S. persons' names. Ezra asked one of his subordinates to get an example of how the unmaskings had been kept track of at the White House so that they could write this into the policy. When he came back the next day, Ezra came to his office and he found a phone book size stack of documents on his desk. And he was told that this stack of documents was the unmasking log from the Obama White House just for the past 6 months. Ezra, after consulting with his staff, decided that the prudent thing to do would be to notify the NSC legal advisor, John Eisenberg. He came back to Ezra several days later in early February 2017 and asked him to retrieve 10 of the reports that had been unmasked by Susan Rice. As the reports came off the printer and they began to look at them in Ezra's office, it immediately became clear that their worst fears were coming true. That the reports, the intelligence that Susan Rice had unmasked, the names that she had unmasked, were the names of Trump campaign officials. And it dawned on them that effectively Susan Rice, in her capacity as Obama's national security advisor, was using her power and authority to surreptitiously spy on and obtain non-public information about the activities of her political rivals in the Trump transition team.
Ezra's continuing the mission after Flynn's departure that really broke the dam open. After they briefed the president in the front office, there was probably a week or two where they were just trying to get their heads around what they were even looking at. It was so shocking. And they decided that they would engage with Devin and say, hey, do you know anything about this? What is going on here? Devin Nunes being the one person elected to political office who really stepped up to help kind of peel the onion open, if you will.
Good afternoon. I know a lot of you are not from the U.S. Congress, so I haven't had a chance to brief a lot of you in the past, but just in order to keep you all fully updated on what's happening with this investigation, today I briefed the president on the concerns that I had about incidental collection and how it relates to President-elect Trump and his transition team.
I mean, I knew it when I saw those transcripts leaked. I knew that we had a big problem on our hands. In this very room, luckily, we had some patriots that came forward from the intelligence community and said, look, they were doing some really bad things with unmasking, so you need to know about this, and essentially showed me how to go find it. I'm not going to get into too much of the unmasking of my sources because they're patriots, and to this day, nobody knows who they are, and I'm going to keep it that way. The morons in the press think they know who it is. We're the House Intelligence Committee. We just deal with the 17 intelligence agencies. We had people that were very skilled in those areas, but we had no one that was really skilled at the Department of Justice. We got to have somebody who can bust down the doors at the FBI and DOJ, and we don't have that.
Kash Patel. Kash Patel is Kashyap Patel, or Kash as he's known in Washington.
Kash, I believe, brought a very different energy to that team. Jack Langer says, who's the communications director, Jack said, it's a relatively sleepy committee. We barely spoke to the press. They're pretty easygoing. They're mellow. And here's Kash. I mean, he's an ethnic New Yorker from Queens, New York, Indian family who lived in Africa. And he just brought an entirely new energy to that team.
Kash was fundamental to gathering information and pushing this. He's got great instincts. This is a guy who really understands the players Cash knows the intelligence community like I know the State Department.
When he came in to talk to me and started walking me through like some of the problems at DOJ, just kind of big picture problems. And almost on the spot, I said, "You want a job?"
I told Devin, I said, "Yeah, I'll take the job." But I was so upset at the lack of internal accountability at the DOJ and the FBI that I said, we have to, whatever we find, we're putting out. And I said, look, if we find something that's bad, we're putting it out. And he goes, deal. I worked closely with Trey Gowdy, who was on the committee at the time. And when I first met him, it was a memorable experience. He goes, because he had just come off Benghazi, and he said, well, welcome to the Hill Cache. This is where good investigations come to die. So we both started laughing. We honestly thought it would be an investigation that almost no one would talk about.
By the time March comes around, we have no intelligence products whatsoever that tie the Trump campaign to Russia. All we have is this dossier that supposedly they're looking into.
So the Steele dossier, it would become the central document for the investigation.
And I remember reading it, and as I'm driving home, I get on the phone and call my best friend in politics, Mark Meadows, and I'm like, Mark, this stinks. There's something going on.
As soon as I heard about the Steele dossier, I downloaded a copy and looked at it and laughed.
If I saw something like the Steele dossier, immediately I'd put Steele under investigation. I'd say, what the hell are you giving me? This is, National Enquirer. When I heard about it in the newspaper, I said, this is ridiculous that they would premise an intelligence investigation on what is clearly a piece of garbage.
Everybody in this town, in the swamp, had that dossier pretty much. All the left-wing reporters and many high-level reporters at the highest media outlets were all shopped this dossier. In fact, they started, producing fake news stories based off that dossier.
A big part of that New York Times interview they did with Trump focused on what's called the dossier.
Do you think that the original P-tape dossier will prove to be true?
Well, we know what he's talking about. He's talking about Christopher Steele's dossier.
So when we went in to be briefed, it's called the Gang of Eight briefing, around the first part of January of 2017. They came to present this intelligence community assessment. And at the end, they start talking about this information, about this dossier information. Very clearly, I asked, where did this come from? These are pretty serious accusations about anybody, right? P-tapes and prostitution and Moscow hotel rooms. I mean, gosh. And why haven't we seen this? Right? Why haven't somebody should have had this? That was essentially the first time they lied and misled us.
So the Steele dossier was out for a couple months, and I had read it a little bit, but I didn't focus on it because I didn't realize I was going to be coming to work and do this investigation. So I was like, all right, whatever. It's just another piece of the Russia banana show. And I looked at it and I was like, there's just no way this thing's accurate. And Devin was like, well, how do we figure that out? And I said, easy. Let's take a couple of quick things that we can readily prove to be accurate just using public sources. Did person X travel to Prague on a certain date? Great, let's go get the airline records. This isn't hard. Easy. It's an international trip. He was either there or not. And if he wasn't there, where was he? Because if he was in, say, Montana, we'd go find the people that said he was in Montana, or a credit card statement or a hotel statement. Then for some of the more outrageous and salacious components of it, the name of the hotel that Steele alleged that President Trump had misbehaved, there's no such room in that hotel in Russia, in Moscow. But the author of the document, we had found out, was an FBI source. So I said, okay, if he's an FBI source, I said, Devin, he's getting paid. We had to dig into his background a little bit just to verify for ourselves. Yeah, he's a career intelligence officer. He's worked with the United States and other partners around the country. Had spent time in Russia. So looks good on paper. But what I found out at the Department of Justice is just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean that person's legit. And, the biggest example of that is James Comey.
Christopher Steele is allegedly a former spy, is willing to do what his clients want him to do. And his clients included Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, and yes, the FBI. He met with the FBI during the campaign at least 13 times. The documents show 11 of those times he was paid money. Which agencies weren't involved in helping either write or push out this dossier? Now we know the State Department, for instance, Jonathan Weiner, a key official in the Kerry State Department, who really has nothing to do with Russia, who looks to me to be, actually he confessed to helping create part of what turned out to be the dossier. He's not only talking to Christopher Steele and is a close buddy and friend of his. So, in my view, the dossier really was never Russia disinfo. It was always Clinton disinfo. And we can't underestimate how involved the State Department was in pushing this dossier lie out.
Through our investigative process, we found out that a firm representing Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, was somehow involved in the matter.
Following the money. If we could follow the money, we would ultimately figure out who was paying Fusion GPS.
I walked him through the investigation. I said, this is why I think this happened. This source said X. We can prove it if we subpoena the bank. And he's like, you want to subpoena a bank? I said, Devin, give me one subpoena, and if I'm wrong, you can fire me. He gave me the subpoena, and we went after the bank. It wasn't like we served the subpoena and everybody went away. Fusion GPS forced us into federal court into litigation over the subpoena itself. And that was when everybody was like, we're on to something.
Fusion GPS is they're very talented at what they do. They're a racketeering outfit. They're essentially, they make things up about people. They spread it to the people in the press. They get them to run the fake news stories. And then even worse, then they find different ways to feed it into the FBI.
And all of these things sort of started coming together in a very unusual fashion. I said, Devin, we're following the money, and I'm going to tell you right now that the DNC and Hillary paid for this. It was 9 a.m. on a weekday, and he literally looks at me, he goes, Cash, if you're going to start drinking this morning, get out of my office. It always goes back to the money, and it's the easiest thing to follow because you have to document it in some fashion or you got to move it in some way. We were able to, pursuant to the judge's authority, allow myself and one other colleague to visit banks' attorneys and review in closed session the records. And we were not allowed to disclose it to anybody what we reviewed. And then finally, on the eve of the ruling of the court, Fusion disclosed that Christopher Steele had been paid by the DNC themselves. There were names that would eventually come out that were being paid by Fusion. Names now that are public, but at the time weren't. Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr, was being paid by Fusion GPS. We would come to learn to do Russian intelligence information gathering and then submit it to the FBI. We were able to figure out that the attorneys, Perkins Coie, were the attorneys for the DNC. Nellie had been working, Bruce's wife, had been working for Fusion GPS. The folks that Perkins Coie paid $10 million to, and then they took that $10 million and paid Christopher Steele $168,000 to dig up dirt. They paid Nellie Orr, I think, $50,000 to do her research against the president and his daughter. And they fed all of that directly to the Bureau, who then used it in the FISA and in the investigation against the president. So now you've connected the money and the people and put the political party right in the middle of your opponent. It's outrageous.
I've got to give great credit to Devin Nunes because he was willing to go the next step. He was willing to look to where was the funding coming from for the dossier. To go the next step to find out that this was a political document, that it was funded by the Democratic Party itself and Hillary Clinton's campaign. We would not have known that if Devin Nunes hadn't said, all right, look, we're going to do a true assessment of the veracity of the information that we're getting. We're not just going to look at the conclusions. We're going to look at the substance behind those conclusions. Look for biases, look for areas in which it's not accurate, and then pursue those to determine what is the truth.
If what was said in this dossier, the central thesis of the dossier was Carter Page, a Trump campaign associate, is a Russian, basically, asset. And the critical mass in the dossier, in the Steele dossier, was it said Carter Page went to Russia, met with these two guys, Russian oligarchs, and the Steele dossier said at that meeting, Carter Page, a member of the Trump campaign, negotiated an agreement whereby he would get 10 to 15% of Rosneft, which is like the biggest gas firm in Russia, in exchange for his cooperation to work on behalf of the Russians to get better agreements from the Americans when Donald Trump's elected. Now, I told Devin, I said, if that's true, he's a Russian agent, the FISA was righteous, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of problems. But I also said, if that's false, they're screwed. If the Steele dossier were true, the Russians were going to pay this guy $12 billion. Like, okay, open up a bank account. Where's this guy going to move his money? Turns out they had nothing to back up their claims.
Cash had gotten FISAs before, so he knew they had done something really corrupt in order to get that warrant.
We were collecting our documents. We were talking to the FBI. We were talking to DOJ, and they told us, they said, look, you guys are charged with looking into Russian active measures. You should know that this is how we surveilled a certain individual who we thought had ties to the Trump campaign. And we were like, what? And then we went and read it. And having done FISAs myself, I was like, this might be one of the worst documents I've ever seen.
The FISA warrant process has to be followed carefully, and it matters because the warrants are issued ex parte. Here's what I mean. Imagine you're being sued, and you don't know you're being sued, and you can't have a lawyer to defend you in court, and then you found out you just lost a lawsuit. There's not an American who would say that's the most unfair process I've ever heard of my life, and you would say, oh, that's the FISA court process. You're being essentially sued in court, and you're not allowed to have a lawyer, and you're not allowed to even know that you're being sued. You're not allowed to look at any of the information being used against you, and you just lost because now they have a FISA warrant and they can just do whatever they want. That goes against everyone's fundamental sense of fairness as a person. Now, the reason, of course, you don't tell the person you're about to spy on them is because you think they're a terrorist, and if you tell them we're spying on you, obviously they'll change. The compromise, or the deal with the devil, was supposed to be that in exchange for not giving the person the due process rights that go back to the Magna Carta, that just go back to your holy book of choice, the idea that if you're accused, you're allowed to face your accusers. You have this in every major religious tradition. The deal with the devil, though, is that everything will be meticulously audited, it'll be reviewed, everything will be truthful, everything will be bulletproof. That procedure, of course, wasn't followed.
We now know the dossier was used in the FISA. So we had shredded the credibility of the dossier. And then once we found out it was in the FISA, we couldn't tell anyone yet. Once those two merged, I said, Devin, this is insane that this document was used to go up on a surveillance warrant of an American citizen.
The second part of that FISA is even worse, and that is that they ran spies even before they got a FISA warrant into the Trump campaign. Government paid United States taxpayers paying for spies to spy on a political campaign, before you even get a FISA warrant. And then not only that, it's exculpatory evidence that they don't even tell the court about.
Was the first time they applied for the application to spy on Americans, the FISA court judge said, it sounds like you want to spy on political operatives. And the application was denied.
They knew Christopher Steele was leaking to the State Department and news media because they had the State Department's documents. That's derogatory information. They didn't tell the court that. They knew that Carter Page was an asset for the CIA, not a stooge for the Russians. They didn't tell the court that. They knew that George Papadopoulos and Carter Page had made statements of innocence, not knowing they were being recorded by the undercover informant Stefan Halper. They don't tell the court that, even though it's in the book, it's in the manual, the FBI manual. It's what you got to do.
So now they've begun this giant web. And if Carter Page or George Papadopoulos had contacted me, Stephen Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, or anybody else within the campaign, it's very likely that all of those people were also being listened to. That unmasking also occurred on literally the day Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th president of the United States, and they unmasked the Trump children, who clearly they were also listening to.
I knew that I was unmasked, that we were targeted. It was sort of assumed that we were targeted. And I always say, hey, listen, I don't think it would be any stretch of the imagination to say that I, the son of the president of the United States, duly elected, but as a civilian, as a citizen, as someone who worked on a campaign, was the number 2 target of the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
So I'm Generation X, and some kind of significant meme that surfaced before we called them memes was 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. This is pre-social media. The idea would be, how many connections would it take you to get to a world famous celebrity? Well, the reason I bring up 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon is because to spy on the Trump campaign, the FBI used the 3-jump rule.
In these FISA warrants, when you surveil one party, you have what is known as a 2-jump rule. You not only get to spy on Carter Page, but you get 2 jumps, or as the Obama administration would have it, 3 jumps from Carter Page, the surveilled person.
You don't even need 3 jumps. 2 jumps get you everywhere you want to be within the campaign, as long as you have like a network node.
Having wiretapped Carter Page, you can now wiretap Steve Bannon. Corey Lewandowski then talks to Trump. You've got a 3rd jump. So now you're wiretapping everyone. So that's what they were trying to do, figuring if they could get into the Trump campaign, somewhere there would be a crime.
January 17, the dossier comes out. March, April, we start our investigation. Summertime, we're cranking on document production and collating a list of witnesses we're going to interview. Fall, hit the home run with the Fusion clowns and figure out who paid for the dossier. So now we're in September, October, going into the holidays. And we had finally also at this time started interviewing witnesses. And in December, we got Andy McCabe. When we asked Andy McCabe, could you have gotten the FISA application against Carter Page without the Steele dossier? And he said no. And I think we ended up doing 65 interviews. We hit everybody, former attorneys generals, Loretta Lynch, Sally Yates, Andy McCabe, James Comey. The central thesis was the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government to hijack the election. Okay, let's find out. So we came up with the 3C questions we were going to ask every single witness. Do you have any evidence or information that the Trump campaign colluded, conspired, or coordinated with any member of the Russian government, with any member of the Trump campaign or Trump presidency? And all 65 witnesses under oath said no to every question. We had to ask that because they were saying it in the media that happened. So these principals were the ones who would have to know that. And if they answered yes, we'd have to report that to the public. And they couldn't just answer a simple question of, where's the dirt?
Reviewing the evidence that I have, I don't think you can conclude that at all.
We had not one person claim that they had or had seen evidence of Trump colluding with the Russians. Not a single one of them could cite any evidence whatsoever that they saw. That's what was going on behind closed doors. Then on TV, you go there and you see Schiff come out and talking about how, more treason has been revealed by Trump.
All you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that. And I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now.
Then there was also the private world of people that we would have to interview as well. The Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign. The CrowdStrike thing was a big deal. Podesta, as the head of the campaign or whatever his role was, had hired this company to do a scrub of their internal services to be like, who's in our stuff? What happened? How did this go down? Which is a reasonable thing to do when you get hacked. What's an unreasonable and made up thing to do is then falsely tie it to the wrong person or country or actor. Normally what would happen in this type of hack is the FBI would come in and have our experts scrub the servers. The DNC hired CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike was in full control, and James Comey has publicly admitted this, of what servers the FBI had access to. So the FBI was only given limited access, whatever the DNC chose. So those were the only servers they were ever able to look at. And this is why you have the disconnect that they've been saying continuously, that the DNC was hacked. It was Podesta's email that was hacked. Nobody knows to this day what actually happened because the FBI has never looked at the entirety of the servers from the DNC, and they can turn those over anytime they wanted to, but they won't because they know it won't be good for them.
Stunning announcement from the White House today. President Trump fires FBI Director James Comey. It's only the second time in history that a president has fired the head of the Bureau.
I think the insurance policy morphed over time. I think initially the insurance policy was, we're going to do this investigation. We're going to get after the president. We're going to spy on his campaign. They did all that. Donald Trump and the American people surprised all of them, and President Trump wins. When he wins, the insurance policy becomes, wow, we got to make sure they don't find out what we did. And who better to find that out? Michael Flynn. So they go after Michael Flynn. Once they get him gone, they think they're fine until Jim Comey gets fired, because Jim Comey was traveling into the next administration too. When he gets fired, then the insurance policy morphs again and it becomes, Shazam, we got to do something now. We've lost Comey. We've lost our man. So what does Comey do? Leaks his memos to get a special counsel appointed. And who better than his best pal, Bob Mueller, to run it for 2 years? That's how the insurance policy morphed over time.
Robert Mueller, it was mid-May, I think, wants his old job back. He's out to pasture. Clearly, he's losing his cognitive capacity, but he thinks, or his buddies think, that he can come back to direct the FBI like he did before. And why is that important? Because if Mueller, who's good buddies with Comey, with Weissman, with all of these Trump-hating, anti-American, Democrat cabal operatives, if they can get Bob, their buddy, back at the Hoover Building, he can just shred it all. He can make all the evidence disappear. Operation Crossfire Hurricane against Mike Flynn, everything else will just be deep sixed. So Mueller is escorted to the White House by Rod Rosenstein, his friend. Rod Rosenstein, arch deep state swamp creature, is in fact running Donald Trump's Department of Justice, because Jeff's just removed himself. President meets with Robert Mueller out of professional courtesy, realizes within minutes, sorry, you can't even string a coherent sentence. You don't represent making America great again. Your old school establishment, you're past your sell-by date. Thank you very much. No thanks. Less than 24 hours later, the guy who's really running the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, makes his friend, Robert Mueller, the most powerful man in the world. He makes him special counsel, special prosecutor, who has the power to bring down the president.
Mueller should never have taken the job. He was compromised, he was conflicted, and it was the appointment arose, it flowed from an illegal act by his friend James Comey, the release of those files. It was part of a coup. And when he came on board, he could have known and should have known that there was nothing to investigate. And he should have shut it down. Instead, he harassed the president for years. And then they have this extraordinary raid on Manafort's home where they go in and start taking pictures of his suits to prove that he was buying expensive suits in outside his regular income. It's completely absurd. They're investigating Russia and they nail Manafort on mortgage fraud and having expensive suits.
They know that there's nothing there. Comey and McCabe know that they have done bad things. And the special counsel's investigation now is a way of trying to cover their tracks. And they've got their buddies in there and they're trying their best to cover for them. And hopefully they will get one wrong thing so that they can make a splash and all of their crimes will be forgotten.
We were pretty careful because we didn't want to step over any lines. And it ends up the corruption is just far worse than even we could have imagined. And we imagined it was pretty bad. When the Nunes memo came out, we thought the whole thing's over. This blows up. It's the end of Mueller. It's the end of the investigation. And the investigators need to be investigated.
Before it was published, they were all saying that Nunes is reckless. This is extremely damaging to national security. The FBI, the DOJ is going to suffer all kinds of negative consequences. Informants are going to be outed. Everybody's going to die. Nunes is killing everybody is the best way I can sum up the narrative that they had going for him back then. Then once the thing actually came out, it was clear that, look, man, there's no national security threats in people finding out that they used the Steele dossier to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page. So then at that point, the narrative shift to it was a nothing burger. There was nothing in this, all the hoopla over this, okay, so they used these unconfirmed allegations to spy on an American citizen. What's the big deal? Carter Page is a weird guy anyway, and, so I'm sure he deserved it. What's the big deal? We had information in there revealing that Comey and McCabe had testified to us that the agents, the FBI agents who interviewed Michael Flynn, did not think he was lying. We had that in our report, and it was redacted. And at the time that our report came out, Comey was going around on a book tour on the country and saying that he didn't know anything about that.
How is it ethical to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And how is it ethical leadership to not tell him that his political opposition, Hillary Clinton, paid for that?
Shortly after that was when Schiff came out with his counter memo, the Schiff memo, in which he argued that everything in the memo we said was false, that there were no problems whatsoever in the FISA warrant on Carter Page, nothing wrong with the dossier, everything's good, the FBI and DOJ did everything right, Nunes doesn't know what he's talking about, he just made all this stuff up. So they have these two dueling memos, but when the Schiff memo came out, that was championed by the media as the definitive debunking of the Nunes memo. All this stuff that Schiff said is true because Schiff said it.
Devin Nunes was subject to such scorn for saying the conclusions that we brought forth in that report, which all proved to be true. The Mueller investigation had to acknowledge them. Today, the Department of Justice acknowledges them. And they certainly contradict all of the national media narrative that we all had to live with for over a year.
All right, so let's do our recap. Okay, first let me go to the chat and see what everybody is saying. When people on CNN talk, in the back of their heads, they're thinking, God, I'm such a jackass. I wonder, General, if they think that, or if they're thinking more or less I gotta feel this has to be real in order for me to keep my job. Because they didn't, the lies they told us, when you're watching this, dog, it is, do you all see why? I'm I don't even watch the news because I can't stand being lied to, but this is to a whole different magnitude, the way they talk about this man, about everything that happened around. I remember this time in our country's history. It is terrible what happened. We're going to get there. Let me see. Yeah. Let me see. I think we had an infiltrate in here earlier, guys. But this person seems to be gone. I don't even see. Oh, yeah. I think we had a little bit of an infiltrate, a John to Emily transition vlog, which is very weird but hey, we welcome everybody. So whatever. Thank you, Zombie Box Reviews. Thank you so much. Now, hold on, let me take this back out. Yes, it is. Harry Toe says, I like Cash Patel. It's funny because when I went to go see this in Maryland, I didn't know at the time these names like Sebastian Gorka, Cash Patel. So I didn't know who these people really were. But I actually was standing right next to Cash Patel, ordering a drink, but I didn't know who he was at the time. I feel like today I would have been like, man, thank you for your service to this country, for coming out and telling the truth no matter what, So I definitely do like his style. And yes, this is effed up. We're gonna get to it. And Dragon Slayer, first of all, thank you for coming through. Fear and greed really turn people into monsters, absolute monsters that we have. And yes, Billy, this is Soviet scale mendacity. Yes, and then exactly. And what's up, JC? Thank you for coming through. And they say, so you see what I'm saying? It is Soviet scale, right? So when you hear Russia hoax, you're like, dang, they lied again. Oh man, that's crazy. But when you really hear the details and the intricate movement that they went through to do all of this, it's like, yo, man, what's going on? Where do we live? What is this? This is insane. So we have, so Cash Patel was talking about the Steele dossier, which, when they did all their track the money, guess what? It was paid, Fusion GPS was running that Steele dossier, and they found that it was paid by the DNC and Hillary's campaign. Now they use that dossier to go to FISA. First of all, FISA is a process that started in, hold on, because I had to look this up. I was like, when the hell did they start? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was established in 1978 when Congress enacted the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is an act that I need to go back and look at. But they use this act to, what they do is they can't tell you, like, we're bringing up evidence against you because we need to spy on you. So that's ridiculous for me to tell you that we're taking you to court and I need to spy on you. And then so I'm not, how does that work, right? But all this so we can fight terrorism, right? Like, so that, I guess that's when, a lot of this war on terror stuff was like really getting, I don't know why they would make something like this. I mean, I guess they call it to combat terrorism. I wasn't born around that time to know if it was really that bad and necessary. But you already know these kind of things, they get used right back on the American citizens. So that's what they did with Trump. That they took the Steele dossier, which was nothing but a bunch of lies, and took it to the FISA court and said, we need to spy on this man. But they were already spying on him anyway. Amazing. And they didn't tell that judge. And then the judge basically says, all right, cool, go ahead and spy on him. And spy for what? But when all they did was doing all that spying, which is ridiculous again, they all said they don't have evidence to show that Russia and Trump were working together to, meddle in our election. Like, I remember when they were saying this at first, I was out, they probably just saying, but when they started to they kept saying it. And I was like, well, if they were saying this happened, this has to be true, because you wouldn't say it happened without like not having the evidence. That's how I thought, the media was supposed to talk to us. In fact, they were lying. They knew they were lying. I don't care. It's like, oh, well, I have the evidence, but it doesn't quite say that, but there's more. There's more behind it though. Like, no, there's not, and actually Fusion GPS is still in the headlines as we speak. So right now we got Trump under indictment for 38 counts of whatever. And yes, I am going to say whatever, because we know the Presidential Records Act says as soon as that president touches the paper, basically, it is declassified under him. So I need to go and print out the whole indictment and really meticulously look at it, because I don't understand how they're saying that Trump entrapped himself when he was president. So whatever he had in his hand had to be declassified. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I thought it worked. Maybe, maybe it changed overnight. I don't know. But I just think that is a bunch of people who just want to see him gone. But anyway, I'll get to that at the end. Now, so you see, with the Fusion GPS, even with this Durham report that took forever to come out to say that there was no Russia collusion, did we even need it, right? Fusion GPS held back 1,500 documents from Durham about like stuff that was in Hillary's and Podesta's and all their emails and all that, like the contacts that they made with them. They held back massive amount of documents. This is coming out still like this recently as the last 2 weeks. This has been coming out. But all we're hearing about is Trump indictment over something he said, like, oh, I'm going to show you this, but I didn't declassify it. I just feel like the whole conversation is weird. Like, it doesn't add up to me, but I'll get to that at the end. So there you go. Now, CrowdStrike, because when the DNC was saying that our emails were hacked, and they were trying to say Russia hacked our emails. Okay, but the FBI didn't go in to scrub to see who really hacked it. They hired an outside source to scrub it, and then only the outside source could give the FBI the stuff that okay, you could see this, but you can't see that. What the hell is going on? So why do we have all these agencies? I'm confused. So, but we got outside source, and so it's all these agencies too, by the way, that circumvent the Constitution and makes this place a communist existence instead of the liberty and justice for all that it's supposed to be. And then when they did the special counsel, I remember when James Comey got fired, because I, again, was listening to leftist media, whatever. And they said, oh, President Trump fired the man who was investigating him. And I said, well, what kind of mafioso? This is crazy. Of course, I didn't know all the stuff happening behind the scenes. And come fired, well, he had to fire him. I mean, the guy was lying all over the place, right? But then they're putting their own people still in place. So these investigations aren't going anywhere but to go right back to investigating Donald Trump. This deep state, whatever you want to call it, this network is not something that one person can walk into and say, I'm just going to end it. Like, it takes time and intricate movements, you know. But let's go to the last act. This is the final 30. And then I will say everything and how it's all connected to, again, where we are today.
After the IG report came out, I would have thought there would be some kind of, little media frenzy, asking Schiff if he stands by his memo.
Looked in the camera and said they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding behind weasel words.
I just...
First of all right, I'm sorry. Let me just stop it real quick. This is why Tucker Carlson had to go too. He's the only person who's asking the right questions. You see what he told Adam Schiff, who was not. Adam Schiff is an infiltrate. He is a treasonous to his country. For you to lie on a president, you know you didn't have evidence. And you sat there shopping this around. I have evidence. I have evidence. Why? Y'all were that jealous of that man? That's insane. And the only person who said, look at that camera and tell us that you know you have evidence that he said he did this. You can't do it because you're hiding behind weasel work. Oh my God, I love Tucker Carlson. I do.
Said that the Russians, I'm not going to be specific as to
because you don't know it. That's why. All right.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion and conspiracy, the questions we were asking. We did it for a reason. And we would go to him and his staff and said, okay, are you seeing something we're not? Because if you are, we'd like to know. But he knew he could just say it on TV, on certain organizations, and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it. They went straight back to attacking us personally, the media and the left. So there were more attacks on Devin and me. We would always say we're over the target when the ass clowns in the media on the left were just shelling us at the same time. And we knew that was coming the second we hit send, and it came hard.
The story in the V came out when?
The cocaine yachts prostitute story? The most absolutely outlandish stories about Devin, and it would be so ridiculous, things that would absolutely defy belief. He was a dumb farmer, he's corrupt, and we were seeing very early on these accusations that he was a Putin stooge, which really stood out to us because the guy, his entire career, he's been a Russia hawk. And there was, for example, a giant billboard on our main highway in the district back home. You had analysts talking on MSNBC speculating whether the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is actually a Russian asset. Some person filed the California equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act against Devin's wife, who's an elementary school teacher, to get all of her work emails.
They started going after his family, and that's just absurd and totally off limits, and writing crazy things on social media and in articles.
I was not just stalked by the fake and phony press who would hang out right outside this office and follow me everywhere they went.
For Best Supporting Actor in working with the Trump administration and going to meet with them on the investigation.
I also had these big picture fake news stories.
This was going on both at the national level in the pages of the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the local level back home.
The media had gone wild. They had been writing crazy stories about everybody, including myself, which was unheard of at the time, to write about a staffer, leak his name, call him basically a genocidal dictator.
Cash, they kind of portrayed as this sort of Machiavellian genius behind what the hipsy Republicans were doing. A guy nobody should be listening to.
They knew that Cash was the one that was giving us the roadmap.
I remember a specific circumstance where Rod Rosenstein was confronted with the fact that he had signed renewal for this FISA warrant. And he turned to Kash Patel and said to Kash that if this did not stop, if the criticism of Rosenstein persisted, if the efforts to call him to account for that signature were elevated, that it might be Kash himself that would be subject of surveillance of our government.
It used to be politicians launched grenades at each other, and that was considered warfare and fair enough. All's fair. You beat me, I beat you. We run dirty ads, and but now we're getting down to destroying the reputations of individual people.
At its core, this was an information operation, an information warfare operation. It was designed to get out a specific narrative, and that narrative in this case was that Trump is a traitor and he was colluding with the Russians.
The bigger problem is the reporting that the same group of circus animals is conducting is not true. It's not accurate.
In having conversations with reporters as they were continuing to play this story out in the national media, we would explain to them that if you go into a classified briefing and you receive classified information and you step out and you tell reporters that information, you have committed a crime. If you go to that same classified briefing and step out and lie about what happened, you've not committed a crime. So the reporters should be suspect. They should question whether or not this person really is committing a crime or whether or not they're just spinning them and giving them the information that they want to have reported.
I honestly think most at some point would say, you know what, why bother? I just retire from Congress, just go do something else, have a quiet life where, I don't got to deal with this nonsense every single day. But that's just not Devin's nature. His nature is when you're punched, always punch back. And I think that was always his instinct through this whole thing. I mean, he can't be bullied and he can't be intimidated. And at its root, that is what the whole media operation against him was trying to achieve.
Biggest misconception about Devin Nunes is that the memo he released was a hoax, when in fact Adam Schiff's memo was a hoax. They attack Devin Nunes for the Nunes memo based on what Adam Schiff said. And if you're an honest person, you would say, well, how could you just say the Democrat wrote a memo, the Republican wrote a memo, all politicians lie, they're both probably full of shit. I would be okay with that. We know that Adam Schiff claimed that he had evidence of Russian collusion, and he's never called out for any of that. But if you're a Republican making those kind of claims, you would never live them down. The media's role in the Russiagate hoax is complex because what we had suspected was proven, ironically, of all places, in the Mueller report. The Mueller report showed how the information laundering works. Someone within the FBI leaks something to Michael Isikoff or David Korn or someone at the Washington Post. That person at the Washington Post writes an article based on the leak, and then the FBI goes and says, look, we have this story about this thing, which means this thing must be true. And then the FBI takes action on that, and then the information goes back to the Washington Post. That's how the information laundering cycle works. Now, boom, number one story, CNN's reporting that this dossier exists and it contains scandalous information. Who knows if it's true or not? It's salacious. There's a whole big if true thing. Does Trump pee on prostitutes? Well, I mean, how do you know that he didn't, right? I can't say for certainty that he didn't. Oh, so now people are like, oh, Trump peed on prostitutes. I can't believe this. It was all, of course, a big hoax. But that's how you launder that information, and you get a document that is based on fabrications into the news cycle.
For me, going into House Intelligence Committee, it's supposed to be sort of a closed door meeting. I'm there voluntarily cooperating, trying to help. I believe I was in there for 9 hours straight. And I got done. It was about 7:30 at night. I walk out the building. I finally get my phone back, open up Twitter, and I'm looking. 11:30. Don Jr. said this. It's supposed to be, behind closed doors, and literally at every bathroom break, someone's leaking to CNN what's going on in the room. Like, why would anyone voluntarily go in there and try to work with them to get answers, knowing that they have no intention of trying to deal in good faith?
We're entering into a new era of information warfare. But the information warfare that most scares me is the very tactics that our Defense Intelligence Agency, our CIA, our NSA have used for years to create misinformation and propaganda, the ability to create false reality on social media, news organizations. They've now been turned inward on the American people. Somebody created a false illusion of a sophisticated, extraordinary capabilities. The idea that you're going to take a document that says Carter Page is a CIA asset helping the American public and change it to say, no, he's a Russian stooge, and fake a court with that, fake the Congress with that. That's how far the FBI went. That is information warfare. That's misinformation at the highest levels. And I don't think the American public has come to grips with what the potential threshold we just crossed.
It's illegal to possess these stolen documents. It's different for the media. So everything you learn about this, you're learning from us.
When CNN says on air, you, the public, are not allowed to look at these, that's what we're here to do. At some point, you've got to say, wow, you got some big balls to stand up on national television and tell the entire world, don't read this. I'll read it to you. I have personal friends who are reporters or who are in like neoconservative or neoliberal fields who genuinely still believe this stuff. They still believe it because their jobs, their livelihoods, their histories, their backgrounds, their resumes depend on them believing it. You know, a lot of this will come down to the supposed fact checkers and editors in newsrooms whose names none of us know off the top of our heads. What role did they play in all of this? Isn't their job to send the bad copy back to Chris Saleza and say, you know, we can't really put this up on the CNN website? Well, why not? Well, firstly, it's not news. It's your opinion. And secondly, it's a mental opinion. It doesn't bear anything close to reality. What are you doing? Please don't send me anything like this again. You know?
Police your own industry. There should be real journalists that stand up and say, this is a phony reporter. This is an advocate. Don't listen to this person.
All those who perpetrated this false story have sat in a bunker and refused to acknowledge their wrongdoing, refused to do what they ethically, morally should have done, which is say, we got it wrong and we're sorry and we'll be better at it next time. And instead, we just moved on to another false scandal and created Ukraine. And we'll probably create another false scandal after that.
Half the time when CNN has, bombshell news, it was about me and it was a lie. These same people, right, that told Congress, no, we didn't see anything. They literally testified under oath the exact opposite, but there's no consequence. We will go on TV day in and day out and lie to the American people to their face, and nothing's going to happen to us.
Want to fire Robert Mueller?
Fake news, folks. Fake news.
What's your message today?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
Mr. Trump.
Go back to 2016. Trump is Hitler. Trump is Hitler. Trump is Hitler. Trump is evil. Trump represents fascism. Trump represents the rise of the new Reich or something. This was their narrative. And this wasn't something that was just put out on the internet or shouted by the Michael Moores and the Code Pinks of the world. This was high-level CNN, Washington Post, social justice crusader narratives and language that was used in the highest levels of America's media institutions.
New York's Daily News ran this front page earlier this week. Trump is Hitler.
And so then when Trump wins in a massive upset, suddenly they have a big problem, because how in their walled garden can they explain that a guy that they told all of their people was the second coming of Hitler, how could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler, right? And so they have a big problem there. How do you explain that away? Are 62 million Americans Nazis, right? No, that doesn't make any sense. Like that's a bridge too far. Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated? So in their movie, Trump cheated with the help of Vladimir Putin, and then that became the reason that America elected the next Adolf Hitler, and that it became useful for so many various interests. Rachel Maddow uses it to gin up her ratings, right? Because she says, we're going to get him, we're going to catch him, we're going to uncover this.
Well, unfortunately, until this is released, I can't comment on the underlying documents, but I can say among the changes that I thought were notable,
instead of some, smoking gun that was always promised, it's classified. You can't see it, right? That was the game they played until Rick Grenell blew that one up. Maybe these guys just actually believe that collusion is real and they're operating in good faith. In reality, that wasn't the goal. The goal was never to prove collusion. The goal was always indictments, convictions, and then impeachment. And that was the goal from the very start of all of it.
This is exclusive CNN video. This is what happened this morning before sunrise, just before 6 a.m., when Roger Stone, longtime Trump associate and advisor, was taken into custody by the FBI.
On the morning of January 25th, 25 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear and brandishing assault weapons arrived at my home at 6 o'clock in the morning in 17 armored vehicles. There was an FBI helicopter overhead. I lived on a canal, so there were 2 amphibious units that pulled up to the dock with frogmen who were also armed. Then they dragged my wife out of the house in her night clothing and bare feet so she could share my humiliation for the CNN cameras. Now, CNN's cameras, we know from the security footage, shows that the CNN camera showed up exactly 14 minutes before the FBI. This would make it the shortest journalistic stakeout in American history. I think, as most people know, I was targeted for a political prosecution because of my longtime support and friendship for the president.
Stone says he has been encouraging Donald Trump to run for president since 1988.
I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning. Between his outspokenness, his national name identification, and his issue positions, he could be a formidable candidate. The indictment against me came up with nothing. It pasted together a very flimsy indictment for lying to Congress, even though the misstatements I made when I went voluntarily to the House Intelligence Committee were immaterial. They hid no underlying crimes. It was a Soviet-style show trial. As I have always said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
I was in Congress for 30 hours. I was the target because it would generate headlines. I'm sure there's an element of stress on my father that, hey, they're putting your kid through this. I mean, don't forget, it wasn't like they're saying, hey, we want to find out. You had the former vice presidential candidate of the United States for the Democrat Party, Tim Kaine, Schiff, saying that I committed treason. Treason is a crime punishable by death.
Can you imagine carrying that weight and that burden as a president, knowing that they're trying to go after your child and thinking in some way, hey, look, they're going after my son because I'm president? Do you ever think maybe at night you say to yourself, gosh, is this worth it? They're targeting my family and trying to destroy them and going after your children.
President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., was back on Capitol Hill this week to talk about his much-discussed Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer who promised him damaging political info during the 2016 campaign.
And he's a father with, 5 children having to hear about this from their friends, listen to it, in school, see it in the paper, on television at night. It's such a scary thing to see, and your heart breaks. When they tell you they want to put you in prison for life or treason punishable by death. Can you imagine when you hear this or you see this about, your father?
My biggest regret of the last 4 years was not being more vocal about what they did to General Flynn. I just said, man, there must be something here if this many people that ran these institutions, I still had faith as an American in these institutions. And it was the most misguided faith I've ever had in anything in my life.
Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn thought he would walk out of court free after a sentencing hearing yesterday.
A packed courtroom was stunned as Judge Emmett Sullivan said he could not hide his disgust and his disdain for Flynn's crimes.
It's not right.
At first, I thought he was trying to do everything he could to get General Flynn to scream out, "I'm not guilty." He threw out the word treason, and he said you arguably sold out your country while you were in the White House. I mean, it was just a breathtaking, excoriating dialogue. I was stunned, and he even paused after his tirade for an hour while the media runs wild internationally with calls of General Flynn having committed treason. The pressure on a criminal defendant, particularly in a federal case, is beyond anybody's capacity to comprehend unless you've been there. They threatened to indict Michael Flynn, the son, if General Flynn did not immediately enter a guilty plea. Young Michael Flynn had just had a baby. He had a 4-month-old little boy. He had done nothing wrong. He had been forced to sell his house to pay legal fees. They threatened to indict him just around Thanksgiving and to indict Michael too. They just wanted to stop the pain for the whole family. They were just broken in many ways and saw no other way out. He should have never taken Flynn's guilty plea. They knew he was not an agent of Russia. They knew there was no collusion between General Flynn and anybody with Russia. We learned that they inserted into the 302 statements that he never made, things they never asked him about, to create the purported false statements. I've seen the FBI manipulate 302s before. They had done the major changes the night of February 10 after they had shown the purported transcripts of the calls with Kislyak to Vice President Pence. And then they went back that night and made changes. It was done and altered until it was approved by Andrew McCabe. If this can happen to General Michael T. Flynn, imagine what they do to anybody who has a single strike against them.
There's so much happening in this country right now that boggles the imagination, and you're at the very center of it.
If one person needs to apologize to the American people for propelling this false narrative for 30-something years, it would be Adam Schiff.
Adam Schiff is the modern day Joe McCarthy. He would come out of an intelligence briefing who would say, nothing there, and he'd go, collusion. You just got to be willing to see it. The willingness to see it is exactly what misinformation and propaganda is. If the facts aren't there and you still see it, you're delusional.
Transparency is not political, and information is power. And when individuals like the Gang of Eight are the only ones to have the information, then they go on TV and they get to say, I can't tell you, but you have to trust me. That trust has been broken because they lied to us.
The best way to clean this whole mess up is with some indictments. That's what people felt during Watergate. That's what we all should feel now if we have any sense of keeping our integrity as a country.
You know, I don't know why criminals engage in criminal behavior. I mean, we can all talk about that till we're blue in the face. The fact is they engage in seditious behavior and they ought to be prosecuted. I don't know who should go to jail. I just want a regular, serious investigation. Heck, I just want someone to be questioned, let alone prosecuted.
Why do you think that is?
Because they don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything. You're asking the Justice Department to investigate themselves. They're not going to do it.
Does anyone really believe that FBI lawyer changed that document all on his own? Somebody had to give him that instruction. We know somebody gave the instruction to the FBI agent not to close down Mike Flynn's case when the law said you should close it down. Now we have a dual justice system. There's a Department of Justice for everyday Americans who get punished, and there's a Department of Just Us.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for, colluding with the Russians, is what they themselves were doing. Not just the Democratic Party and their operatives, but also the FBI.
The Inspector General report on the FISA abuse and the Russia investigation was about the most damning IG report in the history of the United States. And it showed everything we had done and said was true. There isn't any information, because if there actually was, we would have heard about it by now. And the reason there isn't any information or evidence to suggest the Trump campaign coordinated or conspired or colluded with the Russian government is because they did not.
These guys have perpetrated the greatest crime against the American people ever seen. It was a coup d'etat. It was the attempt to take over a duly elected president for their own personal gain.
They made an attempt to overthrow the outcome of a presidential election. That was an American coup. You can't do with the coup d'etat that takes place in Africa or Latin America, where you seize the building of the presidency and you say, I'm the president. Some officials in the political police, the secret police, they are the ones who control the security machinery, and they say, my God, we have discovered that the president is a foreign agent, so we have to arrest him to save the country. If the people in charge of guarding the state choose to turn against the state is defenseless.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this. They try to send them to jail. They try to bankrupt them.
Once you establish this precedent that, the intel agencies oversee the presidency, and if the American people make a mistake by electing the wrong guy, then it's up to them to correct that mistake. And the fact that people think like that in these agencies, I think poses a fundamental threat to democracy.
To me, this really is the crime of the century when you think about it. When you think about all these different institutions working in concert, colluding, all working towards one goal, to take out the president of the United States.
So I tried to say this was going to be bad and warn people. And I thought I had a good grasp of how bad it was going to be, and I didn't. If you had told me in December or January, as the administration was coming in, Flynn won't last a month because of an op that the deep state is going to run against him, I would have said, come on, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And then it happened. So, just to show you how good my judgment is.
I would say that Russiagate has been the most egregious, malevolent abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis and foreign bad actors. If you are right-wing and you're a reporter or a politician, you will have your reputation destroyed. That's if you're lucky. If you're lucky, you'll only have your reputation smeared. If you end up like some other people, you're going to get framed for crimes.
I worry that that is the future of American politics. Personal destruction at the candidate level and the party level is one thing. When it starts getting down to everyday lives, how do you get your reputation back after that? The change in tactics now is anyone who dares speak up and meet the enemy risks the possibility that they will have a false reality launched against them to destroy their reputation and to silence them. And I think that can't be what our founding fathers intended when they created this great democracy and this great constitutional republic.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary and bad. It means we don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it. I don't live in that country anymore. The realization of that is maybe the saddest thing I've ever gone through in my life.
It's not just that we're not the United States anymore. It's what is your humanity? What kind of a human being are you if you are essentially a slave? If you are run by intelligence services, if you're run by the press, if these are the people who dominate your public sphere, if these are the people who make decisions about how you live, about how your family lives, about how your friends live, these are the things that you have to contest all the time if you wish to stay a free person and a free people.
It's time for people to recognize that they've got to stand up and push back on the media, demand unbiased coverage, out those people who are advocates and not real journalists, and tell your neighbors, tell everybody in your social media circle that we are the greatest country in the world, that we have the greatest system. We may not be perfect, but our system is perfect, and we know how to fix problems if we just follow the rules.
If I were writing about the time frame that we lived in and that we're living in now, I would say it wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to know.
Had Hillary Clinton won, we wouldn't have known the different crimes and abuses committed by rogue law enforcement officials or dirty cops, rogue intelligence officials as well. That's true, except you needed something else. Had it not been for Congressman Nunes, had he not been willing to do this, and had he not had this particular team with Kash Patel, with Jack Langer, we would not have known what had happened.
He stood up to the mob. He didn't go along with the narrative. He thought the narrative that the Trump people had colluded with Russia was wrong, and he stood up and he said so at a time when nobody else was willing to do that.
History has already exonerated Devin Nunes in many ways because he stuck to the facts. All right, it was an unpopular storyline, but he was right.
Without Nunes, we wouldn't know we might not know anything about it. I mean, they basically have gotten away with it scot-free, which is sad because the system doesn't work, but at least it's been exposed. And without him, it wouldn't have.
Why is moral courage among members of Congress the type of moral courage that Devin Nunes has? Why is that rare? Well, it's rare in Congress because it's rare in the world. It's a rare trait to go against a mob. Aristotle had called moral courage the chief of all virtues, because if you don't have courage, then you can't be honorable, because sometimes to be honorable and honest, you have to speak out against lies. You have to stand up for the truth.
That's exactly right. Every Republican, senator, and member of Congress should be saying, this is over. We want every damn bit of evidence that every intelligence agency has, or it's maybe time to shut those agencies down.
Big words, man. Big words, Devin Nunes. Whoa. Yes. And well, guys, and that, that was the thinking, right? And here we are today, and Trump never did get his second term, did he? And we wonder why. Well, we know why. We're going to get to why. I have a little bit more that I want to show you guys so we could bring this all into like the full circle that it is, the respect that it deserves. And of course, in the end, CNN is telling you like, oh, we have the intelligence. You can't look at it. We're gonna look at it for you, and then we'll tell you what's going on. Okay. And people go for that. Like, who really has time though? Even today, who has time to really download all these bills and different acts that are being written against us and parse through them, highlight through them. I try to do it myself. They keep us on a ticker tape of confusion. So, it is hard to do so. But, they got Roger Stone for what? Why? Because he was friends with Trump. I mean, that's just really what it was. And of course, we had Donald Trump Jr. saying that he had faith in these institutions. And I understand. He thought that they were supposed to work how they were supposed to work, right? It's funny because so did Rudy Giuliani, because when Ron Paul was, is it Ron or Ron? Ron. Yeah, he was saying back in the early 2000s, like, we need to abolish all these agencies. Rudy Giuliani was laughing at him like, oh, well, guess what? Then the FBI came and they raided your house. He knew what he was saying. Sometimes it's the arrogance, it really is. We don't. Anyway, so let me just present a couple things just so y'all can see what was going on too around the time when, with all of this happening, and all of this was happening. That's a lot to take in what we just watched. I don't know if hold on a sec. Hold on. I don't know how y'all feel, but I do feel like that's a lot to take in, everything that we just watched, because what we watched was a documentary, but it's like watching a movie, yo. Like, you would think that this is something like the plot to this is like, it could be a bestseller. But the problem is that this is our reality. This is what they did to our president, okay? And then more happened afterwards, right? So while all that's happening, hold on. So all this, and then remember, I hate when my Twitter does this. Remember too, when they tried to impeach Donald Trump, but they weren't done with him, okay? Because they knew they didn't have evidence about Russia collusion. So it's like, we got to get him for something. Well, he called Ukraine to ask what's going on. Remember that phone call? To ask what's going on. Remember, this was Joe Biden telling us how he was a tough guy.
I remember going over convincing our team, our others, to convincing that.
That's when Joe Biden used to wear dress shoes. Can't wear them no more now because he'd really be on the floor 80% of the time.
That we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was going
12th, 13th time to Kyiv. Okay, I'm sorry, okay.
Supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was 6 hours. I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. if the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Someone who was solid to not investigate his son, who was working in Burisma in Ukraine in some energy company that when he didn't know anything about electric or energy or whatever, getting millions and millions and then sending money to the big guy, right? When we got to keep talking about Donald Trump, a man who's not our president right now. And we got to keep on worrying about, oh, he had this document and he had this in his hand, but it wasn't declassified, even though the Presidential Records Act would say that it is declassified. When I have to worry about, oh, Donald Trump called, you know, not me, but when people worried about Donald Trump said something bad about Kayleigh McEnany, then you know, every little thing is just every detail is you know, it's what is the word, dissected and microscopically like put to, you know, like we're trying to figure out what Trump is doing now. Trump. And these people, that's what they do, man. They out there in Ukraine. The biggest transfer of wealth is happening right now. It is not just with COVID. It is right now with our inflation, because they keep sending money to Ukraine. But you think it stays in Ukraine? No, it doesn't. It comes right back in the pockets of the oligarchs, of the Lindsey Grahams, of the Joe Bidens, allegedly, in my opinion. You know what I mean? No, I don't have evidence for this, but why are we still sending money to Ukraine? Why? I'm going to get there. But yeah, so Colin Rugg says, breaking more details relating to the FBI document that allegedly claims Joe Biden accepted $5 million bribe have been released. A Burisma executive told the FBI source that Burisma had to pay the Bidens because Viktor Shokin, a Ukraine prosecutor, was investigating Burisma. Okay? Shokin was the prosecutor that Biden publicly bragged about getting fired. The $5 million payment was a retainer, according to the source. The Burisma executive allegedly paid the Bidens through so many different bank accounts that it would take investigators 10 years to unravel. The FBI source is a regular, reliable source, and he's been paid $200,000 by the Bureau. Okay, and so we have this, and so we have that, and so now, so we, you know, everybody's talking about the document, you know, the document. All right, so let me come right back real quick and talk about why we're in this position as we are. You know what I mean? The fact is, okay, I'm just gonna remove. Matter of fact, let me just let y'all listen to real quick what this guy says about policies. I think this is like a good thing. I don't know who this man really is. This is Imran Khan, former Prime Minister of Pakistan.
The U.S. came into it as a conspiracy. It was the army chief. It was the guy who's the prime minister right now. And the U.S. came into it as thinking as I'm someone anti-American. Some reason, if you don't agree with the U.S. foreign policy, you're turned anti-American. First, worry about your own people rather than getting involved in conflicts. And I basically agreed with the Indian foreign policy. Look at them now. They're trading with China, they're trading with Russia, and yet they are part of the strategic alliance with the United States. And that's how it should be, because your foreign policy must reflect what is in the interest of your own population. And that somehow, you know, is in the terms of, I guess, US is maybe considered anti-American.
So first of all, this Imran Khan, he was removed from Pakistan by a coup. It is extraordinary what we get involved in. But all right, so we're coming to wrap all that up. And so what he was talking about, but like, it's funny because he was talking about Pakistan, but that's how it is here for us. If we want policies that deal with America first, we're somehow anti-American. That's how they treat us, because we elected a president that felt as America first as possible, right? I mean, I didn't elect him in 2016, but clearly he was like, he was America first, and he had to go, right? They said the CIA, the intelligence agencies, they got to get rid of him. Because the thing is, when you are America first, you aren't oligarch first. So when you look today where we are geopolitically, we are in a proxy war with Russia, for whatever, if you want to call it that, right? And so we've taken money and we keep giving money to Ukraine and giving weapons and everything to Ukraine. And it's like we told the kid in the playground, go ahead and fight the bully for me, all right? Now, we weren't supposed to be here. Even with everything that Obama ended up doing with Russia in the end, I don't think that they ever were going to look to get into a conflict with Russia. All right. Now, when Trump, because NATO's whole thing and America's actually whole hegemony is China. Okay. That was supposed to be the superpower that we're supposed to be paying attention to. Now, this is me listening to John Mearsheimer, who has like these really good lectures. And I like to go listen to his lectures from the past so I can see how they compare to the future, to where we are today. Under the Trump presidency, though, now, when Obama, he says that when Obama became president, Obama was running on that same tip like Trump, like, you know, anti-war, like, I want to bring the troops home, which he did run on that tip. But when he got in, he says that he realized that he couldn't do that. Like that, what Mearsheimer calls the blob, we call it deep state, the military industrial complex, was like, no, like we're not, that's not what we're doing. Like we got other plans, okay? The difference with Trump is that you really can't tell him what to do. Pause. Because I know a lot of people will say, yes, you can. Yeah, I don't say 100%, but he still had more of a resistance than Obama. First of all, he came in saying, I'm not with NATO. Like, I don't like all of this. He wanted to isolate us in a way where he didn't believe in allies, you know, like all these country allies. He's like, we call them allies, but America ends up paying more money. If you really think that Russia is a problem over there in the European Union, you should be paying more money into NATO than we are, right? Because we're not that concerned with that over here. We're more concerned with America first. And we've seen speeches with him saying that. And isn't that true? That's true, right? So once you come in, you're already coming in. Now, you see what they did before he even started. This man, for as rich as he is, right? Billionaire, billionaire, billionaire. So people just always assume, oh, he's one of them. He's one of them. Listen, I don't know whether he's one of them or not, but I'm saying that this is not a show. What we're seeing here, what I just showed you was intricate steps to remove Donald Trump as much as possible. And then also to cover their tracks while they were doing it. Okay. And people had to go. People had to be casualties of war, like General Mike Flynn. Right? So a person like that coming in, he's not one of them. He just has a lot of money. But he's stepping into another side. Trump was cool. Remember, everybody was friends with Trump. Trump was in the movies. He was in the videos. People were talking about, I got that Trump money, Trump. And then all of a sudden, Trump was this bad guy. Why? Because he decided to run for president. Okay? And so now it's like, all right, now you moving over to it. That's not your lane. Stay in your lane, boy. Like that's how they were trying to get him. And so everybody thought it was a joke at first. Even me, I did. Until towards the end where I was like, this is a possibility. And then Trump became president. The American people actually elected Donald Trump. And in 2008, we elected Barack Obama. Now, Trump becomes president. And so that's already an issue. Like, well, wait a minute. And I've seen interviews where Barack Obama has said, like, there's certain secrets that civilians aren't supposed to know. What type of stuff is it? So I'm paying y'all to keep, but what kind of secrets are you talking about? To keep secrets from me? What kind of secrets are you talking about? You know? So now you have a civilian, no matter how rich he is, he's not a politician. The man was never even mayor of New York, of New York City, for crying out loud. Not even once, right? He went straight to, and can you imagine too, real quick? He didn't do Congress, Senate, and he went straight to president and he won. That is amazing. That is amazing. And so they had to like try to, rewind it back and fix it because they had plans and he was getting in the way, but he kept talking about America first, America first. Now, when you hear John Mearsheimer talk about Trump, and Trump was saying, he didn't like NATO. He didn't like institutions. He wanted to get rid of institutions. Now, of course, he didn't. But how can you? Mike Flynn didn't even make it a month into the administration. You don't really know where to go or like how to move really to get where the bodies are buried, for lack of a better term. And even Michael Tracy said it. He was like, we know if Trump would have started just firing a bunch of people, everybody would have said he lost his mind. The media would have went crazy. Absolutely, they would have. So now we have Joe Biden. So We are in a situation with Russia, and that is what it is. It is with Russia. Before Joe Biden came, we were doing good. We were energy independent. You know, we still meant something. We mattered geopolitically. Now, the other countries, first of all, they're laughing at us. Now, what happened was America should have been was supposed to be just focusing on China and trying to contain China. China's always been, and let me tell you something right now. Every country is going to try to rise to the top. So I'm not here mad because China tried to rise to the top. I'm not. What am I supposed to do? That's what they're supposed to do. And so now they were supposed to be containing that, right? But what happened was Joe Biden comes in, and with his obsession over Ukraine, and not just his, other people there in the, the Uni Party, their obsession over Ukraine, now they back Ukraine into some war with Russia. They go to Ukraine, start messing around. But start talking about Ukraine joining NATO. And what is Putin supposed to do? What is he supposed to do? He's supposed to say, oh, okay, that's fine. No, all of us, if you put missiles in my backyard, I am going to have to step to you like, yo, what are you doing putting missiles in my backyard? Why do y'all keep, and then y'all facing me? Like, what's going on? I got to step to you straight up. That's what it is. He's not wrong for defending himself. Mind you, we already have been over there with Maidan coups, everything. These Russians that live in Ukraine, these are Russians. And a lot of them will tell you that we're really the same people. They're being terrorized. All that stuff's going on. So the man steps in. And now, so you poke the bear, right? And you poke the bear. And the people, I've heard people say like, well, Trump gave Ukraine weapons too. No, he sold weapons, and I'm not, hey, that's not an excuse. But he's thinking like, yeah, I'll sell weapons, whatever. I'll bring money into the country. Not realizing that he's actually, I wasn't in his mind. He shouldn't have did that. All right, I'll give him that. But so now we're in Ukraine. Now Ukraine is fighting Russia, and they are backed mostly by America. We've given more money, $170 billion has come from America, while the European Union has given $20 billion. What is going on in our inflation? We are paying for this in real time. So now we're doing all this, and so we're here. Ukraine's fighting Russia, and I can't. These quote patriots who will say, "Well, Russia's getting weak. Russia's getting weak anyway." No, they're not getting like they're not, because Putin has to use old tanks. He's ran out of new ones. No, he's using the old ones first. And this is easy information, by the way, to find out. But like, I have to go to Twitter and I look up like War Clandestine. I listen to the Duran, Bob Berletic. I listen to different channels who are really actually, paying attention to what's going on. And they're telling you like, no, Russia has factories to make massive ammunition. Why wouldn't I use my old stuff? I will use my old stuff first, get it out the way. I'm going to use my new stuff. Like I have old tanks. I will use that first. So, but you'll hear like these conservatives like, oh, yeah, no, Russia's weakening. That's not true. Stop telling the American people these lies, man, because I can't take the lies on the right either. I can't. That's not true. But now Ukraine has a counteroffensive going on. I'm getting to the crooks. Ukraine has a counteroffensive going on, but Russia is just blowing them out the border. The Leopard tanks are constantly getting blown up. The money that we're sending, whatever tanks and whatever we're sending over there with our money, it gets blown up in an hour. As soon as it hits the ground, it's gone, right? Okay. And whatever little bit of our money that goes over, because I seriously believe like a good 70% of it goes back to the oligarchs. That's just what I believe. They're doing bad. And so NATO has a summit in July, and they're going to talk about bringing in Poland. They're going to talk about that, bringing in the Baltic, countries, and they're going to talk about all of that. America's been messing around in Moldova, causing conflicts over there. So now all of a sudden they're talking about Russia being a problem, whatever. So they're going to bring these people in to fight Russia. And what you need to know is that the European Union, if it total, does not have a force big enough to fight Russia. So now here we are. So what does that mean? We are inching to World War III. And guess what? What they've done now, instead of just focusing on China, and China was supposed to be like the superpower that we're supposed to be containing, you done brought China and Russia together. We didn't see that coming, right? Because it wasn't supposed to happen. So you brought them together. And there's massive countries trying to apply to go be with BRICS. They watched Russia get sanctioned, and they thought Russia was going to crumble because Joe Biden told us the ruble is going to turn into rubble. That's what he told us, right? But guess what? It didn't. And Business Insider's reporting that Russia's economy is pretty much back to where it was when they started in the war. You know what I mean? When the war started, because it did tank for a little bit. It's coming right back up. It's coming right back up. You have Saudi Arabia saying that they're going to do oil cuts. They're working with the East. They're not working with the West. They don't like we don't have diplomacy. We don't anymore. Okay. And so all of this, right? Joe Biden is president. My assessment of all this is that we will go into by 2024, if the election is in November, I think that somewhere in August, they will officially tell us that American boots are on the ground of 2024. But there has to be something that happens in order for Americans to say, yes, we do need to go on the ground. Because remember, right after the Twin Towers came down and then weapons of mass destruction, then we went into, the Middle East for 20 years or whatever. And I don't even know what we got out of that. Nothing but a bunch of... Okay. So anyway, so that's my assessment, because they have to start this war. So the thing is, even if Joe Biden doesn't remain president, then whatever Republican they would give it to, who only one that wants to end this is Trump. Yet, okay, by that, I think that he does. I do. I just don't think that he's going to win the primary. It is Trump. So let's keep it real. We're talking about the Trump and DeSantis, right? DeSantis isn't going to take us out. He's not. When Donald Trump says, I can have this done in 24 hours, of course, he's being braggadocious. But I do believe that if it was now and he got the chance, he could have this done in 24 hours. I have heard certain people say, I think it was Scott Ritter, who said that he would have it done because he would remove us out of NATO, which would be the best bet. It would. Because what are we doing? We're in this alliance and we're not getting anything out of it. And we're putting in a ridiculous amount of money. It is insane what's going on. And now we are inching to World War III. Not to mention, by being in this alliance and doing all this silliness with Russia, and Russia became an example like, when you pull away from the West, you still can, you can float. You don't have to flounder. And so because of that, other countries are saying, cool, let's pull away from the West. Not to mention all of this LGBTQIA, whatever, that we keep trying to crusade through the world with NATO, okay? I don't see the benefit either. I believe in building a strong defense system and having diplomacy across the globe. Also letting people know, don't play with me. Don't get weird, because I will step to you if I need to, right? But not egging people on to now have to step and do certain things, and then we keep blaming them. I don't believe in those lies. So if it was today, I think he'd be able to get us out. But by the time, if he was to get that presidency, I think they'll have us already in the World War, where now it's like you either have to win, because what are you going to do? Say, all right, I surrender? That's not going to work, right? Or he would have to say, because if he surrenders, then they'll say Trump brought down the American hegemony. They'll blame it on Trump, right? Or, now we have to actually fight this war, right? So I think that's what it is. But this is why, for me, I don't even think they wanted to even get to the point of Donald Trump running. Because they need to secure their global terrorism. And there's just no other word for it. There's just no other word for it, right? So that's why I come back to DeSantis. I think DeSantis is a great governor in Florida. Leave him there. He is a jellyfish when it comes to Ukraine. He can't fight it. He's already backed by the people who want this kind of war. Anyway, right? That's where the money is coming from. The Murdochs, that's where it's coming from. That's why, for me, there's nobody else but Trump for me. Yes. Oh, he's braggadocious. He says this, he does that. We already knew that, though. That's not anything new. That's not. He's been like that. I don't understand now we realize. I don't understand. So for me, even if he gets indicted, I'm still voting for him in the primary. Yes, I am, bro. Come on, man. I just watched all this, and I'm seeing what's going on in the world. I don't think anybody really could get us out of it by 2025. But at the same time, if anybody has a chance to think right to get us out of it, it would be him. This time, and now when you get back to domestically, yeah, the agencies are leaving. They are. When Trump was leaving, he was working with Colonel Douglas McGregor. Colonel Douglas McGregor, I've always said if I became president, he would be like my right hand. I'd have to make him vice president because that man has a way of strategic thinking. He talks about things in reality, not in, oh, because it's America, we're just going to do great and we're better than them. It's like, no, you need to understand these people so you know what you're dealing with, that kind of a person. Or at least I'll make him my national security advisor. Colonel Douglas McGregor was trying to get troops out of Syria. We still have troops in Syria, sitting ducks in Syria while the East is coming together and we still have troops there. He was trying to get troops out of Syria. And a lot of these generals lied to him. They lied saying that they didn't have this amount of troops and this, that, and the third. And that's why in the end, Trump started firing people. And guess what? When he started firing all them generals, I remember that it was in December. They said Trump has gone crazy because he's losing the presidency. So now all of a sudden he's just firing people. And yeah, that's just a taste. Trump didn't take down the deep state. Oh man, understand what I just showed y'all is just a small portion still of what has gone down because I don't know everything that's gone down and neither do you. So this is why for me. And the only reason why we know what we know is because he became president. Anybody acts like, well, if I went in there, I would have did this, that, and no, you don't know what you would have did. You ain't know nothing. You didn't know any of this was happening until we had the example. So don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Oh, well, he has too much baggage. Yeah, of course he does because he's the one that can actually make moves. You heard what the guy said. They said that they had a picture of Trump, like they thought Trump was one kind of person, but then they realized that he could actually be geopolitical. He could really be a force. Then he became a threat. And so now, second term, after he's had all this stuff happen to him, y'all were coming guns blazing. Everybody gotta go. That's it, y'all gone. Y'all are gone, you know? But before that, you don't know. So, oh, I would have did this and Trump did this wrong and Trump did it. Yeah, a bunch of people who've never been president who don't understand. You know, like even in the beginning, he thought he could trust people. It's not about excuses. It's the reality of the situation, right? There's nobody else for me. There isn't. Of course, if, Ron DeSantis wins the primary, I'll vote for him just on the strength that I don't want a Democrat, but I don't know how far that really will get us in anything because we're complaining about he's not going to abolish the FBI and the DOJ, do you know what I mean? Or whatever, the CIA, he's not going to do that. He's not going to abolish anything. Let's make that very clear that he's not. He has not been personally attacked by these people. Trump's been put through the ringer. Because what happened to him before is nothing compared to what's been going on since then. All of it now is personal. You know what I'm saying? Y'all got my kids involved, everything. Everybody got to go, right? DeSantis isn't going to do that. And does it even matter what our domestic life looks like if our dollar if we're getting de-dollarized globally, if we sit somewhere, it lasts on a total poll globally. So at this point now, our money will mean nothing. Where it costs $50 for a loaf of bread, that's because our money doesn't mean anything, right? Right? And don't think that DeSantis isn't going to make like a digital state come through because he has digital like clearances in Florida, e-verify, like the truckers, they have to verify that they are who they are and they have to do some digital checking or whatever. And I get it because of the legal immigration and all that, but it's still a surveillance state. It's still a surveillance state. I'm not saying any of these people are perfect. I'm just saying for me, there's nobody else because it just takes a lot of chutzpah. It takes more than that. I mean, I can't even believe this mud that we are in. And to be really honest, it isn't one person who can do it. It will have to be us. And I don't know, maybe one day the American people get really mad. I don't know. But anyway, that is the finale of everything I had to say. And thank you guys for watching because this information, what we just saw, a lot of people don't get to see it. A lot of people don't know what happened. A lot of people kind of know. This is something that all Americans should know. Like, this is what they did. This is what our government did. We paid to have Donald Trump spied on. We paid for that, right? And no matter how you feel about him, that's an American citizen. We've set a lot of precedents in the past, like 6 years that is it. The chickens will come home to roost if we don't figure this thing out. But I still live here, so I'm fighting. I'm trying my best to fight. Like, and I'm gonna fight harder. Like, we have to stand for the truth because we cannot be enslaved. We are not slaves. You know, our rights are given to us by God. We are children of God, and these humans should not be allowed to make these kind of decisions behind the scenes. After we elected somebody, we say this is who we want, and then second time around we said it again. But like Nancy Pelosi said, by any means necessary, Donald Trump will not have a second term. And he didn't, right? How can they have the control to do that? Where do I live? No, we are not supposed to be treated like this. We are people. God made us. God fashioned us. We're not a piece of cosmic dust or a tin can on the side of the road. We are people, and God gives us our rights, and we do not. They don't have the right to treat us like this. So we have to stand for the truth. And that's my final speech. Let me see what y'all were saying on the chat. Then we're gonna end this. I'm starting to shine. General Vague says shifty shift. Yes. And then Dragon Slayer said, the funny thing is that the crazy activists are the ones who are telling us we're social terrorists, even though we're just tired of their invasive right. And but guess what? And the crazy activists have the federal government behind them too. Isn't it crazy? I mean, what kind of show have we become in the past 3 years? It's scary. I'm gonna be real. I don't give a F if this is Words of Paradise. If Trump peed on prostitutes, as long as gas is under $2 a gallon, he could piss on puppies. I mean, and this is the point where people are getting that because the inflation is real. It's insane, man. We stopped. No affordable energy. Oh, man. CNN is full of psychopaths that couldn't possibly be dumb enough to believe what they said. That's true. I mean, they're crazy. All this for Trump. And it makes me too wonder, like, what y'all, like, why y'all so witted to lie about something? Like, I couldn't do it. Like, if I would have saw the direction that corporate media was going and I was working in it, I might have been like, I can't, y'all. Like, I'm gonna just have to start something on my own. Like, or I don't know. I can't do certain things. I can't. Like, I probably would have been with it for a little bit till I would have blew up on set. You know I can't do it. They sacrifice millions of people for their own paycheck. That's what I'm saying. Like, I just would have been like, no, yeah, I'm kind of okay. That joint operation with the FBI and CNN was crazy. Yep. What they did to Stone didn't get nearly enough attention. Yep, straight up betting had to get. Like, CNN was already outside. Like, okay, yeah, any minute now the CIA is going to be here. They told us to be here at 7:30. Like, what? Like, yo, man, it's just insane. It's just really insane. They did Flynn dirty. They forced a confession by threatening his son. Yeah, that's what they said it. Like, you know what I mean? They said it. This is just like Billy said. Billy, you said that this is Soviet, mendacity, and then you hear it in the documentary. Roger Stone is like, this is Soviet level stuff. Like, yes, like, it's just insane. Like, crazy how we knew about all that stuff, yet nothing has happened. Nobody involved in all that corruption or treason got arrested. Now Trump is indicted again. That's what I'm saying. That's why when I see it, I don't even like, people will say like, oh, this time, well, it's his fault this time, because I don't think y'all understand. They are trying to get rid of this man on different angles. They're like, keep throwing stuff, something going to stick. At some point, something will stick. It's insane. It really is. He also mercurial, and that sets Russia and other countries on their heels. Yes, like that's the thing. There was a level of respect that Trump had it too. Like he has this characteristic where you don't know what to expect with him, which is kind of good. You keep people like on their toes, on their heels. Like, you know what? Let me not mess around with. It's all right, my guy. We're not gonna get too crazy here, okay? Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. We're and the truth is all we have to stand by the truth. What is up, Jana? Thank you for coming through. What is up? So that's it at the end of the day, y'all. So thank you for watching. And it was really important that I showed this. I have to nuke. I don't think I'm gonna nuke this. I think I'm gonna just take the copyright because I feel like that I was on here for almost 3 hours and I need the watch hours. Well, hopefully they won't copyright it, right? So wait, Words just said, I remember playing dodgeball in 8th grade gym. I dodged 5 balls, then the 6th got me. I hope Trump is better at dodging them than me, because that's a lot of balls. It is a lot of balls, but the problem is that these deep state actors, man, they're serious, yo. And it almost scares me because they're getting hysterical. They're getting hysterical. And it just looked like they had got hysterical with JFK's. I don't know. And JFK Jr., in my opinion, allegedly. Don't quote me, but I don't think that was exactly what was reported to us either. But that's another story for another day. But yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast. I had so much fun with y'all. Oh my God. And thank you everybody again that y'all was part of me becoming, getting my 1,000. And so now we're not done yet. I'm coming up with a new challenge for myself. So I'll be putting in the work, getting the grind going. I have more episodes coming, So thank you for everything. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye.